This is Atomic Shinobi, and today I'm going to narrate first part of What If Neglected Naruto has an unknown tail beast. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Now, wasting no time, let's start the story.
For the residents of the Leaf, October 10th will always be remembered as a terrible day. The Kyuubi, also called the Nine-Tailed Fox, almost destroyed the Hidden Leaf on this night, which will go down in history. This night, a lot of courageous people would risk their lives as shinobi and kunoichi to defend not just the Leaf but also the people who were significant to them. One of these shinobi was now standing atop the Hokage monument, and as he watched everything unfold, he reflected that he would much rather be with his wife, who was recovering from giving birth to quadruplets and having the 9 tails removed from her body because the seal had been weakened by the birth. But there was nothing that could be done about this. As he made the necessary hand seals to perform the Reaper Death Seal, fate seemed to be on his side, if not in a twisted way. Minato Namikaze knew what he would have to do to save everyone he could, but he was more than willing to sacrifice his life to do so. However, he feared for his children, whom he would have to seal the beast inside of. He knew that they would grow up to be heroes, but he hoped that the village would view them as heroes. He was aware that it was too late to turn back when the Shinigami materialized in its spectral form, but it wasn't the knowledge that he was going to die that made him shiver. Rather, it was the Shinigami's voice when he called upon him. The ghostly form said, "You are the luckiest mortal who will ever use this jutsu for this one time only since you have helped to father the chosen one. I will not take your life, but if you use this seal a second time, I will collect your soul without a second thought or a shred of remorse. No, for the payment this time I will collect a different currency from you." Minato used the 8-sign seal to seal the fox into his 4 children, the yin and yang of the beast into his 2 daughters, the soul into his second son, and the excess chakra that was still running amok into his eldest son. This would have a profound effect on the Hokage's eldest son later on because, at the same time, someone else in the Leaf was also sealing the excess chakra they could siphon from said fox into another newborn child whose fate would intertwine with that of the eldest child. Following this warning, Minato hurried to find his wife out of fear for her life due to the Shinigami's words. He was greatly relieved to discover that she was still alive and well. Now that the catastrophe had mostly been avoided, the village's attention was directed toward finding the dead and tending to the injured. A stunning blonde woman roared as she passed through the hospital, "Everyone had better not be slacking, you hear me? If I even think you're not giving it everything I'll drive you through a wall." The renowned Sanin, Tsunade Senju, was the woman who barged into the hospital after visiting the Uzumaki Namikaze family. Tsunade turned to face her right hand woman, assistant, and student after noticing that she was not receiving any attention because of the absurdity of the situation. "What's the situation looking like so far, Shizune?" she roared, not seeing the women in question. Tsunade Sama. The injured have been reduced by half thanks to the field staff dealing with situations outside of the hospital that weren't severe enough to warrant admission. From the number of patients and medics, I'd estimate that we're just about finished treating the ones who have been admitted, and I haven't seen more than 7 patients be admitted in the past hour. I think most of the shinobi and villagers who were injured have been taken care of, replied a pretty but worn-out woman with raven hair that is now called Shizune. Tsunade expressed her relief at having the situation under control by letting out a sigh of relief that she had been suppressing. "Phew, that's good. I feared that there would have been many more injured and dead than there were, thank goodness. That means that all the injured are accounted for, meaning that the village got out in extremely good shape when you look at other villages who were attacked by Biju." Shizune recalled the 2 who were in the center of the attack and sighed with her mentor. For a moment, Shizune forgot about the leader of her village and his spouse. Tsunade Sama. You said that all the injured were accounted for, right? What about Kushina, Sama and Minato? Sama? She cried in concern. Relax, they're safe. Minato had a severe case of chakra exhaustion, but he'll be alright knowing him. Kushina, aside from the usual signs of having just given birth, is completely fine as well, thanks mainly in part to her Uzumaki longevity, even after having the Kyuubi forced out of her. She's still alive and is going to make a full recovery. She'll be up and about in a few hours. Look, I'll even make a bet with you about it, I'm so sure. Tsunade responded with such assurance that she offered to place a wager with Shizune regarding it. This was no small statement, considering her nickname, the legendary sucker. When the threat that had threatened the entire village was finally eliminated, the 2 laughed together in relief and joy. That is, until Tsunade noticed that Shizune was also making fun of her mentor's infamously bad luck and began chasing her around the hospital wing, her fists waving menacingly in an anime fashion, while the other patients and hospital employees laughed amicably at the 2's antics. until a young nurse rushed up to the two, informed Tsunade of what had just transpired in a different hospital wing, gave her a chart, and left to resume her duties. After hearing what had been said, Shizune covered her mouth and gazed at her mentor, whose face was simultaneously filled with sadness and anger. The question that was on Tsunade's mind came from her student's lips as she looked up from the chart and off into the middle distance. Shizune knew that the person who would be receiving the news wouldn't take it well, so she asked, "How do we break the news to her? What do we do, Tsunade?" "Sama?" she asked again after nearly a minute of waiting for a response, looking to the other women for the answer. Only to have her respond, "I don't know." "Minato, are you sure that you're alright? You used the freaking Reaper death seal but somehow you didn't lose your soul like what was supposed to happen. Don't you find that this is just a bit too strange?" This tall man, who was Jiraiya, a legendary Sannin and Minato's mentor, asked anxiously at the Uzumaki Namikaze estate. He had red paint markings on his face and spiky white hair that reached his mid-back. Minato created his famous Rasengan to highlight his point to his mentor. "Sensei, I told you I'm fine. Look, I can do everything without any problems. I need to go see Kushi-chan and my kids, so please don't worry, everything is fine." Jiraiya sighed and gave in, placing a hand on his pupil's shoulder and congratulating him on both his victory over the Kyuubi and the start of his family. With pride in his voice, Jiraiya walked with Minato to the room set up especially for his kids. "I'm proud of you, Minato. You've come so far even without my help. I couldn't have asked for a better student in all my life." They found what they were looking for when they silently opened the door. Kushina holding all four of their children in her arms. He approached her without saying anything, sat down, and gave her and their kids a tender hug. Minato remarked, "Kushi-chan, they're gorgeous." Jiraiya alerted Minato to a knock at the front door just as he was starting to unwind. Because of everything that had been going on, he got up and went to see who it might be. He and Jiraiya arrived at the door to find Tsunade and Shizune there. Shizune was holding a newborn, and both women had a disapproving expression on their faces. "May we come in?" Tsunade asked, and Minato motioned for them to enter. When the door was shut, Minato turned to face them, and both women turned to face him. Minato couldn't help but wonder whose child was sleeping in the arms of the raven-haired girls and what had happened to force them to come here at this hour. Jiraiya thought it was equally odd, but he refrained from speaking out because he didn't want to offend Tsunade. They both look at Tsunade and say, "We need to talk to you, all of you." This means that Kushina must also be included in the upcoming discussion. Tsunade couldn't help but swoon at her godchildren, who were the cutest, as he led them to the room where his wife and children were entering. Kushina grinned back at her until she turned to face Shizune and saw the baby in her arms. She asked, a little perplexed, "Shizune, who's your passenger?" to the child who was sleeping. Tsunade was suddenly reminded of the main reason why the two of them had brought the child along. As Shizune handed him to Minato for their mutual observation, Tsunade grinned piteously and met Kushina's eyes before declaring, "This is Umiko's son." Both Kushina and Minato grinned at the infant while he slept peacefully. She looked around and then at Tsunade, saying, "Where is Umiko and why is he not with her?" With a hint of bewilderment and concern in her voice. "Oh, he is so cute, she must be so happy." Kushina paused as she wondered why they had brought the baby here when she would have seen him when the two women turned away and remained silent. Kushina tensed up in shock before feeling sad as she glanced at the infant and back at them, tears welling up in her eyes. She fervently hoped it was a bad joke and didn't want it to be true, but Tsunade's expression indicated otherwise. The quiet question, "How?" was so icy that it sent shivers down the spines of the two women. Shizune claimed that omitting the final sentence didn't make Kushina's grief over her sister's passing any less intense. Shortly after she gave birth, they tried to bring her back, but she looked back at the infant, who was actually her nephew, her new son, knowing full well that the council would use him in ways she didn't want to consider if they didn't adopt him as a full member of the family. He briefly stirred in Minato's arms before going back to sleep. She couldn't resist a small smile. The mentor's words did little to improve the situation, but both of the new parents found some small solace in Jiraiya's words as he placed a hand on Minato's shoulder and said, "I'm so sorry both of you for your loss." Minato had liked Umiko and considered her family in every way, even though he had only met her a few times before and had known her for a brief period of time when she lived with them in the village. In fact, it was Minato who informed her that she always had a place in the family estate they lived in and that she didn't even need to ask when she returned to the village after she and her husband had moved to a small village following his death, which prompted her to return. "We know that this is not the best time to ask, but..." Before Tsunade could finish her question, Kushina said, "Yes. She took the boy from Minato and added him to her already full arms, asking the two women, "What's his name? We will adopt him and raise him as ours. It is what my sister would have wanted." Tsunade was taken aback by the abrupt response and blinked for a moment before refocusing and responding. Tsunade said, "She died before she could name him." Kushina was moved to tears at the realization that her sister had never been able to hold her son, much less name him, but that the child who had survived thanks to Kami needed a name and a family. She would be devastated if she failed her sister by not providing this boy with a home and all the love she would have if she were present. She was certain that if things had gone the other way, Umiko would have taken Naruto, Menma, Mito, and Narumi, adopted them, and raised them as her own, giving them all of her love. She was upset that her family had lost a member, but she was also happy to hold that little boy in her arms. Although she had lost one family member, she had gained a new one. Looking down at her and Minato's tiny bundles of happiness, Kushina thought, "Well, we can't have that now, can we?" As they all considered possible names for the boy, the room changed from somewhat solemn to joyful. Minato suggested Azuma, but Kushina shot it down. Jiraiya's proposal for Yuto was also rejected, and other names were proposed until, at last, Kushina looked up from the boy and said, "How about Koga?" The room fell silent for a minute before Tsunade said, "I like it." She smiled down at her new son and stroked the side of his cheek, noticing his smile and knowing she had chosen a good name. Sanin and Shizune departed shortly after, leaving the two and their kids alone. Kushina buried herself in her husband's arms, sniffed a little, and then thanked whatever force had kept her family together for the most part despite what seemed like insurmountable odds. Although she was saddened by her sister's passing, she was equally thankful that her husband and kids were still alive. As she sobbed quietly and trembled a little, Kushina whispered, "Mina-kun, we're together. We're all together. You didn't have your soul taken, and I survived having the Kyuubi removed from my body. We're going to be able to watch our children grow up and they'll have a family to love and take care of them." The all too real possibility that she could have lost her husband in her life, leaving her children alone in the world. Minato comforted his wife by embracing her and telling her that nothing would ever make them worry about their family again. Parents and children remained together through the night until they fell asleep because the mental and emotional fatigue they had both accumulated had finally peaked. The Shinigami, looking down at the scene in front of him, knew that what he was about to do would completely alter the family's situation, but a deal was made and the debt had to be paid. "Sleep well, child, for the price that replaced your father's soul will greatly affect you. As the child of prophecy and the child who will change the world, you will be without the love of the ones who should love you the most. That is the exchange that I had made in place of your father's soul. You will be without love, but you will be the one who will defy all obstacles that will stand in your way. As you will forge a path that will change the world, remember this one thing: do not give in to the hatred that will undoubtedly plague your heart in the future to come, for you must rise above it." The Shinigami was unaware that his sister Kami had made some adjustments to his plan in order to balance the scales, because she knew that if it were to succeed, it would not only destroy a family but also cause the child of prophecy to abandon everything he was meant to protect, which could potentially result in him destroying everything and bringing about the end of the world. 8 years have passed. As time went on, it appeared that everything would largely proceed as the Shinigami had predicted. However, he was a little saddened by the scene that was being mocked by a silent onlooker, in which Kushina and Minato were teaching 4 young children the art of chakra control while they attempted to climb a tree using only chakra. "Chan, 2.san. Can't we learn any cool jutsu yet?" Menma cried as she fell to the ground for the 3rd time during that training session. Minato responded patiently, saying, "When you have better chakra control, then we move on to a jutsu or two, but first learn the basics." Kushina, who was standing beside her husband, responded to Menma's complaint by saying, "Good chakra control is the key to being able to do all kinds of things in the way of jutsu. I've told you before that when I was young, I had a lot of chakra but no control, so I couldn't do much in the way of jutsu and it made it hard for me to learn things. This is why it is important to practice good chakra control so that you won't end up like I used to be back when I was young." Although she knew the boy wouldn't be pleased with her response to his complaint, he wouldn't argue with her either because he knew she wouldn't hesitate to make her point by jolting him with common sense. By a narrow margin, Koga Uzumaki, Namikaze appeared to have a better understanding of it. Born on the same night as the other Uzumaki, Namikaze's siblings, he preferred Kushina's hair color because it was vermilion red, but he had a combination of his parents' features. His eyes were a clear bright aquamarine with a hint of green, and he wore tan cargo shorts and a black shirt with the Uzumaki crest on the front. Umiko would have assumed that he had his father's jawline. One might assume that the four siblings were having a happy family moment as they tried, failed, and tried again. However, one participant was missing from what would have been considered a typical scene. Kushina and Minato exchanged glances as they turned to head inside, knowing that one member of the family was sadly missing. Koga stayed outside for a minute, looking up, and he noticed Naruto watching from a tree. He gestured to his brother to come inside and try to spend time with the rest of the family, but Naruto shook his head while standing on the branch and looking down to the wall's street side. The rest of the siblings didn't get along with Koga and Naruto, but Menma seemed to despise his brother. However, before they were 6 years old, he would constantly try to act like Naruto, and now it seemed like the boy just wanted to get rid of him. Like Menma, the two sisters had a better relationship with Naruto when they were younger, but they now seemed to avoid him as if he were a stranger. Regarding his parents, they made an effort to include Naruto and even tried to get close to him, but each time they did so or went to ask him to practice with them, they felt as though the world would end if they even approached him, and he would chicken out, or they would search for him and discover that he was simply gone. He would arrive home late and leave early, giving the impression that he was avoiding them, which could have been true in all fairness. Looking back, they realized that their yelling at him for attempting to do the water walking exercise unsupervised 1.5 years ago had gone a bit too far when they said some things that no parent should say to their child. Although they both wished they could go back and change their words and actions, they knew that the only thing they could do at this point was to improve and show him how much they loved him. The majority of the residents of the village ignored Naruto as he strolled through the streets. Perhaps only a dozen people paid any attention to him and behaved differently from his family. Hana and Sume Inazaka, along with their partners, were one such couple. The two women were kind to the boy and would invite him and Koga to visit and play with the Ninken whenever they had free time. One day after Naruto had fled the house after Menma told him to get lost, the two had met the boys. Koga, who wished to attempt to resolve the issue that had been brewing between his two brothers for some time, came next. Unaware of their destination, the boys discovered themselves in the Inazaka kennel face to muzzle alongside Kuromaru and the Haimaru triplets. The two boys were being licked to death by the Ninken, who had taken an immediate liking to them, when mother and daughter ran to investigate the disturbance in the kennel. This was a rare sight for the two women to witness. Following that, Koga and Naruto played with the dogs until they were exhausted. Sume's female genetics, which seemed to make things seem cute, kicked in when she saw the photo she had taken of the four Ninken in a pile and the two boys napping. She squealed with delight and rushed to get Hana, who reacted the same way her mother did. Kushina squealed, just like the two Inazakas, when they showed her the picture of the boys and Nikken napping together after they had taken the two boys home. The two women would then stop Naruto whenever they saw him and inquire about his well-being, among other things. Alongside the two of them were the Ichirakus, who owned the ramen stand that Naruto enjoyed but that everyone in the family enjoyed, Yuga Uzuki, a member of the Anbu who was like a big sister figure to him and Koga, and Makoto Uchiha Kushina, who was a friend and sort of aunt to the 5 children. Though he was amiable enough and even assisted Naruto with his taijutsu, Might Guy was occasionally a little too excited for him, especially when Lee and Koga joined them occasionally. Izumi Uchiha, who was kind and had urged him to keep trying and never give up, had been more helpful than she could ever imagine. She was viewed by Naruto as another sister figure, but he could make fun of her for not talking to Itachi Uchiha and telling him how she felt or losing him to someone else. Naturally, this led her to threaten to burn all of the ramen in the village after stealing it, which made Naruto implore her to refrain from such a terrible act. Shino Aburame had occasionally asked the boy if he would join him for bug hunting in the woods outside the village, which they both found enjoyable. Even though Shikamaru Nara and Shoji Akamichi were kind to him and made an effort to be friendly, he would always leave when Menma arrived, telling them he had to go. Last but not least on the list of people who knew the young blonde was Anko Midarashi, who enjoyed making fun of and taunting the boy. He would chase him around the village, be chased by him, and be pranked in return. For several years now, this had been the norm. While the situation at home was not improving, in fact, it appeared to be getting worse. Naruto would either spend most of his time alone or train with Koga, the only family member who didn't have any issues getting close to his brother, in an attempt to restore the way things were before they turned 5. He would be scarce in general if he wasn't training with his brother. He would go to the training location the two boys had discovered, which was remote from the majority of the village and a great place to skip rocks. He could also go there whenever he wanted to be alone. When they went on family vacations or went out to eat, he never voiced his opinions or spoke up much because he thought it would only give someone the opportunity to be angry with him. The family was unaware, however, that Naruto had a secret sibling who was imprisoned within him. His father was unaware that the method he had used to seal the fox's excess chakra inside Naruto had included some of his own chakra as well as a small amount from a passing dire wolf that had approached too closely. The 3 chakras that had been sealed inside him combined to create a brand new tailed beast, which Naruto encountered the night his parents punished him for attempting to water walk alone. As he recalled how he had met the wolf pup who shared his thoughts, he couldn't help but question whether his plans for tonight were the right ones. Go back 1.5 years. When Naruto woke up, he was in what appeared to be an endless forest of trees. The trees themselves had green leaves and were light brown in color. They were too high up to reach without tree walking, and even then, it appeared that he would need to take a little stroll before reaching the lowest branch. The last thing Naruto remembered was sobbing in the corner of his room, and he wondered how he got here. He pinched himself to make sure it wasn't a dream, and he felt it with a little ouch. He knew it was real. Naruto tried to figure out how he got here because he thought he heard a sound that distracted him from his thoughts. It sounded almost like someone crying, so he followed it to find out where it was coming from. He searched for a few minutes before locating the source of the sound and was shocked to discover a lone wolf pup curled up in a ball, whimpering, in a small clearing. He approached the small pup slowly and steadily so as not to startle it, then extended his hand in an attempt to console it. The boy he was sealed inside was crouching close to him with his hand outstretched when the wolf's head snapped up as he leapt back. Before he spoke, the little ash-gray wolf gave him a long look. With brief sobs, the pups asked, "Why or why you here?" After blinking a few times, Naruto nearly leapt a full foot back. The blonde boy said, "Why you Jay? Just talked." The wolf stared at him and rolled his eyes. With a hint of annoyance in his voice, the dog said, "Of course, I can talk, you act like it's a big deal. Kuromaru talks and yet you don't find that strange." Naruto looked the young wolf pup up and down, momentarily stunned by the fact that he had now encountered 2 talking animals. "Who are you and why were you crying just now?" he asked. The young wolf gave him a look that said, "Dumb," in large, bold letters. "I am alone, why else do you think? I have been here all by myself with no one else around." Naruto inquired, "How long have you been here?" "Ever since you father sealed the chakra of the 9 tails in you. I also have all the fox's memories up till the portion of excess chakra was sealed inside you, but what your father didn't know was that when he sealed the chakra inside you it took a small amount of your own chakra and some of that of a passing by wolf that got too close. When it all was mixed together inside the seal I was born." The puppy said while sitting next to Naruto. The wolf pup just made a statement, and Naruto's eyes widened. "So, what you're saying is that you're the son of the Kyuubi?" he asked. The young pup said, "Kind of, but when I woke up, I was here and no matter how much I looked no one was here with me. I have been alone from day one." Naruto felt sorry for the young pup because he could somewhat identify with the wolf. The wolf pup gave Naruto a glare when he asked, "What's your name?" With a hint of heat in his voice, the wolf said, "Are you trying to be funny? I don't have a name. Did you not just hear me say I have been here all by myself since day one with no one to give me a name?" With a stunned expression on his face, the wolf blinked at Naruto as he said, "Well, how about I give you one?" With no hint of heat left in his voice, he asked, "Why you would really do that?" As if it were unheard of. After a brief pause, Naruto said, "Of course, I would. Everyone deserves to have a name. Plus, I know what it's like to be alone too." He concluded by petting the pup's fur next to him. The dog turned his head away from the boy and snorted. The wolf said, his voice bitter, "How would you know what it's like to be alone? You have a family." The wolf glanced back at Naruto and noticed a gray cloud had formed over his head, as if it were going to rain. The wolf blinked to make sure it wasn't dreaming, and as he spoke, the boy's head was low, and it was looking down at his feet. He turned his head away from the wolf and muttered, "Some family. They don't see me like that. They avoid me like I'm a stranger or treat me like I am not worth their time." The dog asked, "What about your one brother who spends time with you and trains with you?" "Koga is the only one who seems to treat me like family and even tries to get the others to do things with me or even asks my opinion most of the time, though it just ends with Menma telling him that it isn't worth the time to ask me and they end up arguing or my parents telling us to behave." The youngster commented, "He also says that I should try to find a way to fix things with everyone, but every time I try it ends up going bad and I just feel worse afterwards." The young wolf inquired, "Do you hate them?" After responding, Naruto became animated. "No, I don't hate them, in fact I love them, all of them. I just wish that they would see me as family too." He changed the subject and tone completely, saying, "Now then about that name. Let's see who Ko, yes, that sounds about right." The wolf was confused because the little cloud that had formed over the boy disappeared as quickly as it had appeared. "Ko?" the recently named puppy asked after giving it another go. The boy smiled at the little dog and said, "Yup, it means happiness. Also, it's a prayer that one day you and I will find happiness and love." After glancing up at the boy, Ko grinned and said, "Thank you for giving me a name." He was crying. Finish the flashback. A range of emotions, including sadness and happiness, were evoked by the memory. He was confident that he had someone who would always be there for him, even if he felt isolated. He was feeling a little uneasy as he considered what he was going to do to his family. Going to his and Koba's designated training area was one thing, but what he was about to do would make any rational person reconsider. He heard Ko's voice echoing in his head at that precise moment. In Naruto's mind, the wolf Biju said, "You should try talking to them, maybe even tell them about me, it might make a difference, you know." He mentally reacted to his tenant's suggestion by saying, "I don't think it will make a difference, besides who would believe me anyway?" In reference to the fact that Naruto had been secretly learning to control the chakra cloak that the young tailed beast's presence inside his body gave him access to, Ko retorted, "I still think you should leave a note at least to let them know where you're going. Plus, if you want them to believe you, all you have to do is channel my chakra." In contrast to the fox's, the cloak's chakra was viridian green in color, and even though it wasn't as corrosive, it still hurt a lot. "Besides bro, with what we are about to do, it's best that we just go," Naruto responded. "All that would do is make them ask too many questions and they would get mad at me for not telling them." The young boy concluded, stopping en route to retrieve the pack he had hidden at his and Koba's favorite training location before continuing on his way. Regarding their destination, Ko remarked, "I still don't like this plan of yours. It's called the Forest of Death for a reason, you know, and most sane people try to avoid going in there. Look bro, we're leaving and that's that." Naruto's tone conveyed to his adoptive brother that he had made up his mind and couldn't change it. The young Biju retorted to the blonde boy, "You're nuts. Seriously, you have to be the craziest person I will ever meet." The blonde Jinchuriki responded, "It's who I am and there is no changing it, you should know that by now." There is no better way for Ko to describe it than, dragged along for the ride. That's what I am afraid of. Unaware of the two blurs pursuing him while attempting to remain hidden, Naruto simply laughed in his head and proceeded directly to his destination. As it turned out, Ko had grown significantly since they first met, which made them think that he was absorbing chakra through the seal. This led them to assume that his tenant, who already had 3 tails, would grow along with the boy. Because the boy was not only an Uzumaki but also the son of a Jinchuriki, he possessed enormous chakra reserves, so this was not a life-threatening situation. According to their belief, Ko would keep absorbing chakra until he attained the level of the 9 tails. To be honest, they had no idea whether this would actually occur or not. When he arrived at his destination, he paused for a moment and gazed up at the gates that encircled the foreboding training ground 44, also known to many as the Forest of Death. The name was merely a name, but that didn't mean it was safe. In fact, that was the reason he had chosen it as the location for his training in seclusion, where he hoped to find what he needed to gain his family's acceptance as a member. As the training ground loomed before them, Ko remarked, "I still think this is a horrible idea." As he prepared to enter the deadly forest, Naruto asked the Biju, "Ko, are you a wolf or a mouse? The only thing we will have to worry about is Anko, who supposedly lives here. Otherwise, the animals most likely will leave us alone because they can sense your chakra. That doesn't mean that a few of them won't think twice about trying to make us their meal, and I for one plan on living well past the point of getting my 9th tail, thank you very much," the wolf replied. The 4 blurs had gotten close enough for both the beast and the boy to feel their signatures during this time. Naruto sensed them approaching and thought, "Anbu, 4 of them and one is Neko Oni-chan." As Naruto gave his surrogate brother a mental glare, Ko became alert and asked, "You mean that pretty Anbu girl with the cat mask?" Naruto answered, "Ko, this is not the right time or place." One step forward, and the 4 shadows that had been following him for some time now landed behind him. She wore a white cat mask with red lines on it and had long purple hair. The masked woman, perplexed by the young person's behavior, questioned, "Naruto, what are you doing here? It's late. Why come here of all places?" Without turning around, he said, "I'm sorry, One-chan, but I need to be away from the village and my family for a while." To put it mildly, Yugo was somewhat taken aback. She didn't think it was this bad, but she did know both of his parents, how things had been going at home, and how most of the village ignored her favorite blonde. "Naruto, please listen to me," she begged. "Whatever is going on at home you can talk to me about it. But right now, let's get you home." At the sound of that word, The blonde's eye glistened with tears. Home. I wish that place did feel like home, Yugo's team said, much to their confusion. But I'm not wanted or even needed there, since no one but Koga will even come near me. When he said, please don't say things like that, Naruto, your family loves you, Yugo's eyes widened. He turned to face her, grinned sadly, and raised his hands in a hand gesture. Sorry, Nei Chan, he replied. But this is something that I have to do, Shadow Clone Jutsu. He called. 9 identical copies of Naruto appeared, shocking everyone who was standing there in the 9 plumes of smoke. Her team responded, Nani, Shadow Clones, but he's not even part of the academy yet. Yeah, me and Koga kinda broke into the vault where the forbidden scroll of sealing is kept and copied the directions for the jutsu, Naruto said, chuckling, and then turning back to Yugo. Tell mom and dad I don't hate them or Menma, Narumi, Mito, and Koga. Tell them despite everything that has happened I still love them all. He paused, looked down, and said, and tell Koga I'm sorry. Then, while his clones followed suit and fled into the forest, he performed a chakra-infused leap and a lazy backflip that propelled him over the fence and into the woods. One of the group asked, shit, this is worse than bad, what do we do? Neko Anbu, who was knowledgeable about the Shadow Clone Jutsu and its applications, including the ability to divert pursuers' attention by making them pursue clones instead of the target you were pursuing, bit back a curse. She turned to her teammates and gave them stern orders. Go get another team and Anko, she will know this place the best and be able to guide you through some of the more dangerous parts, she told a member and glanced at the other 2. Go in after him. If you find you're following a decoy, double back and pick up another trail. The 2 members exchanged glances as if she were insane. They slowly turned their heads back to the source of the hostility, feeling a great deal of intent to kill. The 2 men also claimed that Neko's eyes had turned red in that moment, and that her killer intent appeared to take the shape of a gigantic cat ready to jump on its prey. If you 2 want to live past tonight, get in there and start following him, or I will cut your legs off at the knees and leave you for the predators of the forest to feast on, she said with a stern voice. As Yugo's eyes narrowed, one of the 2 men said, but where are you going? She replied, to tell the Hokage, now get moving. Yugo turned around and ran straight to the Hokage's house to deliver the bad news, while the 2 men reluctantly fled into the forest. XXXX Mito was assisting Kushina Uzumaki in the kitchen as she prepared dinner for the family. Her mind drifted from one thing to another until it settled on one topic. As she began to consider how much the family had been neglecting her oldest son, a sad expression appeared on her face. She even remembered how she and Minato had screamed at him when they discovered that he was attempting to perform an advanced chakra exercise called water walking. She must have felt terrible about the words and tone she and her husband had used when speaking to him. It wasn't until after the incident that she realized what they had done and remembered the terrified and frightened expression on the young boy's face. Looking back on that day, she knew they had undoubtedly scared the boy and caused him to feel hurt and confused. She went to apologize later, but what she saw when she went into his room that evening made her regret everything she had said to the boy. Flashback. Naruto's room. 1.5 years ago, Kushina approached her oldest son's bedroom door and slowly turned the knob before opening it. She thought the worst when she first entered the room and saw that Naruto's bed was empty, but then she noticed the blonde hair mop across the room. She approached him and froze when she noticed the boy curled up in the corner of his room, arms wrapped around his legs as if he were waiting for someone to hit him, and legs tucked in close to his chest. Naruto, Kushina said softly as she approached the boy cautiously and knelt beside him. Naruto, she tried again, reaching out a hand and placing it on the boy's shoulder, but he did not respond right away. When she noticed her son was sound asleep, she got up, went to the bed, and pulled back the covers. Then, in order to avoid waking the young boy, she knelt down again close to him and carefully lifted him into her arms. She took off his shoes, laid him gently on the bed, and pulled the covers up over him. She wished she had come sooner to apologize after seeing the tear stains on his cheeks and feeling disgusted at herself and Minato for how they had treated the boy that afternoon. She gently rubbed the side of the boy's face while she sat on the edge of his bed. As she continued to speak quietly to avoid waking him, she apologized to Naruto, saying, "Your father and I didn't mean to overreact the way we did. She shook her head at her next words and turned back to face the boy. No, there is no excuse for what we did. However, know that we would never allow anything to happen to you and that we still love and care for you just as much as we do for the others." She looked down at the boy with an expression that only a parent could make to convey their love for their child, and she leaned down to give him a gentle forehead kiss. With a sad smile on her face and a lone tear streaming down her cheek, she got up and said, I will talk to your father and we will try to be there for you more, especially me. She also gently brushed a stray bang of Naruto's from his face. Good night, my little maelstrom, she said. I will always love you. She then quietly closed the door to avoid waking her sleeping son and left the room. The end of the flashback. Kushina had talked to Minato about what had happened and he agreed with her that what they had done was unexcusable and that they needed to make amends for their actions. But once again when Minato tried to approach his eldest son, he felt the same fear that if he got close to his son, things would go horribly wrong and he would walk away feeling defeated and like a failure as a father. The boy had also become scarce and would seem to never be around. Nevertheless, as a mother, she had made a commitment that the next time she approached her son, she would not fail and would say what she had needed to say for a while. Her thoughts were interrupted when she heard her husband enter the kitchen through the front door, sag into the chair he had pulled out, and mutter something about burning paperwork as he entered the room. Long day. Looking over her shoulder at Minato, who was staring up at her with a weary expression on his face, Kushina asked. I swear, even with Sarutobi's assistance, it seems like there is more and more paperwork every day. There are moments when I believe the council is looking for ways to create more paperwork simply to get a sick thrill when they see my face. Turning her head back around, she tried to conceal the fact that she was laughing at her husband's misfortune. She managed to gather herself and instructed him to get the kids dinner. Kushina turned off the stove and went to set the table, but as she was about to do so, she heard a series of urgent knocks at the front door. Sama the Hokage. Sensei. Get the door open. The voice of Yugo, a pupil of Kushina, sounded urgent, and Minato stopped her as she was about to go to the front door. Have you seen Naruto, Kushina? With a worried expression on his face, Minato said, I can't seem to find him. I checked all the rooms, and none of the other kids seem to know where he is. The other children entered the room to wonder what was going on. When she opened the door, Kushina saw her former student standing in the doorway, dressed in her standard Anbu uniform. Her expression said it all. Whatever it was urgent, and she was furious. Sensei opened the damn door. Yugo yelled again, knocking even louder. Yugo. What's the matter? She inquired. With a worried expression on both Minato's and Kushina's faces, the purple kunoichi said, It's Naruto, capturing the full attention of the parents and children. He went into training ground 44. It seemed as though time had stopped in the entire house, but Kushina broke the stillness. What? Her eyes widened in horror and fear for her son, and Kushina's scream was so loud that the entire village, if not the entire land of fire, could have heard it. The Death Forest. What on earth is he thinking about entering there by himself? Now, Minato asked, fearing for his son. As her face displayed anger and worry, Yugo said, he felt that you didn't want him, and the best way to make everyone happy was to leave. This news shocked everyone, including Menma, who was taken aback by his brother's actions. But he said to tell you that even with all that has happened he still loves you all. Kushina thought, you. Unwanted? Naruto, you truly believe we didn't want you? She was startled out of her reverie when Yugo went on. He also said to tell Koga he was sorry. The boy put up his hands and said that he had no idea what his brother meant and that he had been trying to get Naruto to make amends with everyone else for a while. Have either of you even talked to Naruto in the past few weeks or even paid any attention to what has been going on with him? Yugo asked, glancing into the eyes of Kushina and Minato. It would be an understatement to say that she was irritated. You, the people who should love him the most, seem to be too busy to even notice that he's hurting on the inside, while the majority of the village ignores him and only a handful of people even acknowledge his existence. Even though it was true that Kushina and Minato had been keeping Naruto at arm's length, those words sliced through them like a knife. Instead of approaching the boy and trying to help, they should have approached him. Kushina was about to reply when a hand was placed on her shoulder, and she turned to face Minato, who shook his head before continuing. He looked at his wife and said, we can blame ourselves later and feel sorry for ourselves, but right now our son needs us more than ever. As she went to her in Minato's room, wearing her Jonin ninja gear and her hair pulled back into a ponytail, Kushina looked to her other children and told them, the four of you stay put, lock the doors and don't open them for anyone. She then turned to Minato and said, let's go get our boy back. With that, the three of them fled into the night to find Naruto. As he jumped from branch to branch through the tall trees of the notorious Forest of Death, not much had happened so far because his clones had done their job and attracted the attention of his tails, making it much harder for them to track him. He had not yet encountered any of the forest's creatures, much to his and Ko's relief, but as he continued to venture deeper and deeper into the forest, he realized that he would eventually need to rest for the night, Even though the Uzumaki bloodline had given him large stamina reserves and he had learned about his family's unique abilities and other helpful facts. Although he had wanted to learn them from his parents, the knowledge he had acquired through study would be useful to him. But all that knowledge would be useless to him if he exhausted himself to the point of collapse. We need to find a place to rest for the night. Even with your Uzumaki longevity, you will burn yourself out if you aren't careful. I know that, but first I need to find a place to rest that is secure, Naruto said. Ko thought it was a good idea and replied, "Why not use one of the trees? It will keep us away from predators and allow us a high vantage point." No, that's way too obvious and will not help. We need to find somewhere that is hard to spot and can stand bad weather. I mean, we are going to be here for a while, so it only seems like a logical choice, replied Naruto. As he made his way deeper into the forest, hoping to find a cave that was out of sight, Ko told him to stop and head down to the forest floor. When he arrived at the location his adoptive brother had mentioned, he noticed an opening in the side of a small hill that looked almost like a crescent moon, but it appeared to be a dead end and was too easy to spot, so Ko told him to take a closer look and that he would help. When Naruto looked again, Ko enhanced the boy's eyes, turning them to a lupine yellow, and he realized what his friend was referring to. It was dark enough that the hole would appear small and cramped to the naked eye, but with his improved vision, he discovered a small passage at the back that was concealed by the layout of the cave. Following the passage, he found himself in a much bigger cave that led to what looked to be some kind of mural depicting wolves and what looked to be ninja fighting side by side in battle. This reminded Naruto of the Inazaka and their ninkin, but what he saw led him to think differently due to the depiction of a set of hand signs that Naruto thought he recognized as the summoning technique. Deeper in he found a lone scroll that sat on a stone pedestal of sorts. Taking the scroll he opened it and found that it was not just any old scroll but a summoning contract. Naruto read the scroll and found that it was the contract with the summoning wolves, which from what he saw and how much dust the scroll had gathered told him that there had not been a living user of this contract in a long time. After talking with Ko and making his choice, he signed the scroll with blood as was directed in the contract on the scroll. Deciding to try out the new technique, he bit his thumb and swiped it on his palm, making the proper hand signs and slamming his hand down. He called, "Summoning Jutsu." A large plume of smoke filled the room, and when it dissipated, a large white wolf with a black diamond in the center of its forehead stood in its place. The wolf looked around the room, and when its eyes fell on him, he froze as said wolf growled and crouched down. Naruto thought he would be ripped apart by the summon. His mind racing, he was thinking about using a jutsu when Ko's voice was heard in his mind. In an urgent tone, he said, "Naruto, kneel down." "What? Not sure whether to fight or flee," Naruto replied. The tone of the Biju's voice indicated that it was either that or be mauled. "Kneel. This wolf is one of the matriarchs of the pack. If the scent I am getting is correct, kneel or she'll attack you." Naruto knelt and lowered his head, following his friend's advice. The she-wolf cocked its head curiously and sniffed at him. After it was done, it retreated and appeared to be trying to figure out something. Then it spoke, asking him, "Who are you, young one, and why does your scent convey that of a human and wolf?" Never looking up for fear of her attacking him, Naruto blinked before responding, "My name is Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze and I'm a Jinchuriki, if that helps answer your question." The wolf, who was old enough to realize that there were only 9 Biju and that none of them were wolves, appeared perplexed by the statement and gave the boy a strange look. "If you are going to tell me that you don't know of any Biju that's a wolf, it's because he's a new Biju born from my chakra, the 9-tailed foxes, and that of a wolf who had some of its chakra absorbed by the sealing technique that was used," Naruto said before she could ask what he was playing at. She was even more perplexed by this new information, wondering how it could be true. The boy had to be lying about what he said, but his scent was unnatural, so how could that be? If he was telling the truth, it would explain why his scent was so strange. "I should be able to connect her to your mindscape so we can show her that you aren't lying, but she might say no, so don't be surprised if she turns you down or worse, friends to take your hand off," Ko said, hoping she would agree. Naruto asked her if she will let you place a hand on her shoulder. "If I may, my Biju says he might have a way to show you that I speak the truth, but in order to do so he says that I would have to be touching you to do so. If you would allow me the chance, I will show you that what I say is true." Naruto, having no other options, took a chance and looked up at the she-wolf swallowing. "I do not know you well enough for that, young Naruto, but perhaps I can help both of us," the she-wolf said after giving it some thought. The wolf then began to move toward Naruto, who lowered his head, and when she reached out, he thought he would have felt a paw, but instead he felt a human hand gently place itself on his shoulder. The next thing he knew, he was in his mindscape, along with the other beautiful women he had seen in the cave. Ko approached him, but when he didn't move or speak, He waved a tail in his face, but he received no response from his surrogate brother, who appeared to be broken. The wolf women giggled as Ko remarked, "Now there is something you don't see every day." You left him speechless. Not many people can say that. I know not many have seen this form, but like the summoning foxes, certain summoning wolves have a human form they can change into, she said, looking down at the boy after the lovely woman approached him, placed his head on her lap, and waited for him to wake up. Ko lay down next to Naruto, and when he woke up, he felt his head resting on something soft and opened his eyes to see the radiant face that had caused him to faint, looking at him with a smile before his brain could short-circuit again. The woman blushed and cleared her throat when Naruto said, "No, that's not it," as he gazed at her. "It's just that you're so beautiful I didn't know what to say or how to react." Looking at the other wolf in the room, she said, "Well yes, thank you," and inquired, "And what is your name, young Biju?" "Ko," he said, bowing, "And could you tell me your name?" "My name is Usagi," she responded, bowing slightly herself. Somewhere else in the forest, a group of ninja were racing from branch to branch while a certain red-headed kunoichi was tearing through anything that stood in her way. The sounds of what would have been a battle were coming from somewhere else. "Stop getting in my way." The voice, which belonged to none other than Kushina Uzumaki, who was cleaving her way through many of the forest's vicious beasts that were stupid enough to stand in her way, screamed out in desperation and anger as a large Sankei fell to the ground with its head severed. Minato and Yugo, along with a few other Anbu and Anko Midarashi, the only human resident of the training grounds, followed behind her, remaining in the back as Kushina used a borrowed sword from one of the Anbu to cut and dice or use any kind of jutsu on the unfortunate creatures that were either foolish or unlucky enough to stand in her way. Anko, who was slightly frightened as she watched Kushina beat a bear's skull in when it attempted to swipe at her, remarked, "Oh man, even I know not to mess with an angry mother who is looking for her child." Minato could only watch in alarm and worry at his wife's condition, knowing that she was as desperate as he was to find their son, but he could also see that she was becoming tired and had expended a lot of her chakra, and he had to take action to prevent her from hurting herself. "Kushina. Stop, please. We must return," he remarked as she was now using her chakra chains to strangle another unfortunate creature before slamming it to the ground and turning to face him in agony and rage. "I will not abandon Naruto in this dreadful location. Going back without him is worse than rotting in hell." As she backfisted a massive lizard that was about to attack her, she argued, causing the reptile to fall to the ground with its eyes rolled back in its head. "As much as you want him back, so do I, but if you continue to push yourself in your current state and overuse your chakra, you might end up killing yourself," Minato shot back. As she continued forward, Kushina was only able to narrow her eyes. By this point, every creature was hiding in terror from the wrath of the redheads. "I'm no I, but you can all go back if you want to," she gasped when she felt a chop at the back of her neck, but Minato caught her before she could react because she was too focused on getting her son back to notice her senses. "I apologize, sensei. However, I must stop you for the sake of Naruto and the rest of your kids." As she turned to Minato, who had a serious expression on his face as he slung his unconscious wife over his shoulder, Yugo apologized for what she had done. Minato's final thought was, "Naruto. Be careful and stay safe," he said, "Come on everyone," adding, "We'll continue looking for Naruto in the morning when we have better light." The group of shinobi then disappeared as they left the area. After a little more discussion with the young boy, Usagi found out what had been going on with Naruto, what had brought him to the forest, and why he was looking for a place where no one would find him so he could train. After some more questioning, she discovered that the boy didn't want power, but rather wanted to get better so that he could show those around him that he was worth their time. After some consideration, she finally decided to offer to take him back to where she was from so that he could train under the wolves, which would be better than training alone with no instruction at all. The young boy accepted, and when he saw where they were, his mouth dropped open. He was led into a large cave, and as he was led through it, he discovered that it was enormous, with a vaulted room in the middle that had a skylight that let the moonlight through, giving the room a silvery glow. As she turned to leave the boy to sleep, Usagi said, "Welcome to Full Moon Cavern," guiding him through the lengthy tunnels to a sort of room that would be his while he stayed and trained here. "Get some rest, you will meet the leader of the pack tomorrow." He unrolled the sleeping bag he had brought and a comforter from home, lay down, and then he sat up and dug through his pack to find a picture he had taken of the family when Naruto and his siblings had just turned 6. It was the last time they had been a whole family and things had been better. He sighed, tucked the picture under his sleeping bag, and rested his head on the little pillow he had brought and let sleep take over. Before he fell asleep, he reflected on his younger years and wished that things could return to how they had been. As the sun rose and shone through the skylight, Naruto slept, As 4 young wolf pups leapt on him and licked him until he stood up, the tunnels became brighter. When he finally got the pups off of him, he moaned. Okay. Okay, I'm up. I'm up. One of the 4 wolf pups bit Naruto's wrist as he was finishing his outfit and began pulling him through the cavern's hallways, while the other 3 pups followed. Naruto cursed as they went by, and the other wolves laughed as they went by. After everything was said and done, the pups had taken him to a place with a raised platform that resembled a rock, and on his left eye was a big wolf with a scar that resembled a moon. He exuded strength and was considerably bigger than the others. From his vantage point, he looked down on the boy and wondered what could have brought someone so young here. Usagi approached him and said, "Young Naruto, I would like you to meet the alpha wolf of our pack, Taiyo." "It is a pleasure to meet you, young one, but if I may, what is it that has brought you here?" replied Taiyo. Naruto looked down at his feet and remarked, "I have come here to get stronger so that I may prove to my family that I am worth something and not just someone to ignore." Naruto explained to the big wolf what had happened to him and why he was trying to find a training ground. As he spoke, Taiyo stayed silent and absorbed all the information the boy had given him. When he was done, the big wolf got up and came toward Naruto, who bowed on one knee in front of him. Taiyo's eyes widened as he leaned closer to catch Naruto's scent. The great wolf was shocked to learn that he did, in fact, smell the scent of a biju. Usagi had previously informed him that the boy did, in fact, have a biju in his home, but he had assumed this was just a ruse to trick her. This information gave him a completely different perspective. "So you seek to become stronger for your family?" he asked, stepping back to give the boy some space. "Yes," was Naruto's soft response, but he received a loud, angry response in return. "Speak up, boy, a wolf doesn't cower when he speaks." Naruto answered, "Yes," and briefly looked up at the wolf with bewildered eyes before that changed to resolve. Taiyo asked sharply, "And what would you do with such power?" "What would I do if I had power?" Naruto blinked. It was a valid question, and he asked himself what he would do if he had power. Would he abuse his position of authority or use it for the right purposes? Would he act morally, or would it be preferable if he never had such power so that he couldn't harm people the way he had? As he searched his mind for a solution, his thoughts veered from one extreme to the other. He suddenly remembered something that had been said to him when he was 6 years old. Rewind: the boy was 6 years old when Izumi Uchiha asked him, "What do you want to be when you grow up, Naruto?" "I want to be a strong ninja just like my dad so I can beat up bad guys," replied Naruto. With a knowing smile, Izumi scowled at him and said, "Is that really what you want, or are you just trying to act tough?" Naruto looked away shyly, surprised that she had figured out what he had been trying to do. She looked at him with the expression Naruto always associated with a sister, saying, "Naruto, you shouldn't fight only to hurt others. That isn't the reason you should be fighting for." Looking up at her, Naruto asked, "So then what should I fight for?" Izumi responded, "You should fight to protect what is important to you." "Okay," Naruto said with a smile and a nod, "and when I do, I will protect the village and the people who are precious to me." Izumi gave the boy a smile in return and asked, "You promise?" while extending her pinky. Reaching out, Naruto locked his pinky around her, "Promise." Finish the flashback, but Naruto stared the great wolf in the eyes and said, "Thanks, Izumi-chan." He also declared, "I would use it to protect the things that are important to me. I would use it to fight those who try to hurt others and to prove that I am worth something and am not to be ignored." He nodded his head and smiled at the young boy's resolve. Then, primarily for the boy's safety, Taiyo described the cavern and the places Naruto could and could not go. For example, Naruto was not allowed to enter the nursery because that was where the newborn pups were kept. Knowing that a pregnant wolf giving birth was more dangerous and protective and would kill him without a second thought, he nodded in understanding. Taiyo advised him to learn from them if he wanted to become stronger. In addition to fighting and protecting himself, this required studying the fundamentals of jutsu techniques, controlling chakras, and practicing chakra nature exercises. The training was demanding and difficult. At times, he even considered giving up, but he learned and became stronger over time, motivated by the thought, "I will prove my worth to them." Naruto was 12 years old at the time and much stronger than he had been before coming here, so that was 4 years ago. Naruto thought a lot about what might have happened when he returned home during that period. Would they return to their previous state? If nothing changed, he would definitely be better off never returning, because the one thing he couldn't stand was being ignored once more. It is possible for him to take that with loathing, fear, and hate, but he could never experience that again. In his opinion, it would be a fate worse than death to be completely ignored, to be seen but not heard, to be regarded as an outsider among the people he grew up with, and to be treated as a stranger in his own village. When he noticed a lone person approaching him, he stopped practicing a set of katas for the taijutsu style that the wolves had taught him. He grinned as she approached, and when she stopped, he bowed to her, to which she replied. Naruto said, "Usagi-chan, what can I do for you?" to the she-wolf. He looked at her, surprised that the great wolf believed he was ready, and she said, "Taiyo-sama sent me to tell you it is time for you to return home. He also wishes to speak with you before you go," she said. As he and Usagi traveled to the location of the elevated platform, like rock, Naruto wondered when this day would arrive. Upon their arrival, Taiyo stood on the platform and gazed at the young boy who had grown significantly during their stay. "The time has come, young Naruto. I believe that you are ready to return to your village," Taiyo replied. I don't know if I can What if things haven't changed at all? What if my family still treats me like a stranger?" The big wolf interrupted Naruto as he was speaking. "Are you a wolf or are you prey? You came here to train and make yourself stronger, to prove your worth so you could protect those important to you, or was that all just a lie?" asked Taiyo. "No, I meant every word I said," Naruto said, his tone a little heated. With a loud voice that reverberated throughout the room, Taiyo said, "Then stand up for yourself and show them that you have changed. Show them the fruits of your labor and prove your worth to them." He continued, staring the boy in the eye, "Go now, Naruto Uzumaki. Wolf's blood. Namikaze, and show them that the lone wolf no longer walks alone." Naruto then thanked the wolves for allowing him to train with them and bowed before heading home. The fourth Hokage and his family lived in a quiet house. While the children were at the ninja academy getting ready for their graduation in a few months, Minato was at the tower carrying out his duties as the village's leader. Kushina, who was standing by the window and gazing out toward the forest of death, was the only person in the house. Accordingly, she had a serious expression on her face. Her son had been gone for 4 years, out of sadness, neglect, and hurt. You would have thought that more people would have been curious about what had happened to cause this when the news of Naruto running into the forest spread throughout the town, but it appeared that nobody in the Leaf Village even noticed his absence. Kushina found it difficult to believe the boy who came around telling her that he would return, even though there were a few people who had been close to him. The fact that they trusted the boy was a minor consolation, but it didn't make Kushina's heart feel any better. Night terrors about Naruto being killed in gory ways and Naruto asking why she hated him had been her nightmares ever since the night she fled. The night he ran away had been the worst. Flashback to night terror. Kushina's eyes popped open when she realized she was back in her family's living room. The odd thing is that she was the only one with color, while the entire space was monochromatic. With a look of complete shock on her face, the bewildered woman glanced at her hands. What's happening? Where am I? She thought to herself, but as she started to hear voices, her thoughts were interrupted. She instantly identified one as Minato's, and the other as hers. It sounded like they were shouting at someone. Suddenly, it struck her as she was overcome with fear. When she saw the calendar, her heart fell, her eyes grew wide, and she fled to the kitchen. This date was all too familiar to her. "No, don't do that again, please. Never again." As the shouting outside grew louder, she thought. After that, she ran to the back door and opened it, only to be horrified to see herself, Minato, and Naruto in the backyard. Naruto was crying, his whiskered cheeks showing fear. The Minato screamed at Naruto, "You stupid little bastard! What were you thinking using an advanced chakra exercise without our permission?" The younger blonde said, But two. Chan. Aye. But Kushina gave her a hard slap in response. The past Kushina screamed, "That's enough out of you. I can't believe a little shit like you would try to pull a stunt like this." The present Kushina winced at the words, tears streaming down her cheeks. "No. Put an end to this. Stop, please." She pleaded with any god in the world to put an end to this torture, but it was in vain as the two ghosts of her and her husband kept yelling at Naruto, who was now sobbing while curled up in a ball. Then, to her dismay and anxiety, a menacing smile appeared on her and Minato's lips. The past Minato nodded in agreement as the past Kushina stated, "It's clear that this little shit stain doesn't know his place." He remarked, "Yes, and we know what happens to brats like him," as the real Kushina watched, obviously perplexed by what she was seeing. As past Minato produced one of his Hiraishin Kanai, Kushina thought, Wait, this is not right. We sent Naruto to his room. Furthermore, nobody would seem to care. Kushina's former self said, "The entire village already ignores him, so they won't even notice he's gone," and her eyes widened in horror. Her alleged past self, before a thought could reach her, unlocked her chakra chains and pulled Naruto by the neck, spreading his arms and legs wide. his face now displaying genuine fear as he gazed at the two of them. K. Ka. Chan. T2. Chan. Please. Naruto pleaded in a strained voice, but their smiles only grew more ruthless. I apologize, Naru. Chan. We didn't want you, though. The 6-year-old boy screamed in agony as the other Kushina said, we have your brothers and sisters after all. Then, with a sickly, sweet voice, another chakra chain exploded from her back, and the kunai tip sped at him, piercing his shin. What had just transpired caused the real Kushina to look horrified, and her face showed it. This isn't what happened. This is all wrong, the Uzumaki yelled at herself. After that, she witnessed Minato throw his trademark kunai behind Naruto, vanish in a flash of yellow, and then reappear behind Naruto holding a recognizable spiraling ball of chakra. Rasengan. The boy cried out in pain as Minato slammed the chakra ball into Naruto's back. No, quit. Kushina screamed as she tried to help her son, only for something to grab her ankles and make her stumble. She looked down and saw what looked like black vines wrapped around her ankles. She reached for her kunai pouch but found nothing as it was gone. Desperation taking hold as she clawed at the vines, trying to get free to save her child from this torture. Let go of me. She let out a roar. Another scream followed, and she whipped her head back, her eyes widening as a second chakra chain pierced Naruto's other shin, followed by 2 more to his forearms. Panic set in as the red habanero now struggled harder than ever to reach Naruto, but then a second black vine sprang forward, grabbed her wrist, and yanked it back. As the same thing happened to the past Minato, Kushina saw the past Kushina transform into a hideous, twisted version of herself, with her skin horribly burned, her red hair in a greasy mess, her teeth sharpened into needles, and her eyes a bloodshot, demonic yellow. 2 ninjutsu swords then emerged from the ground, their blades old and rusted. Now for the finishing touch, said the now demonic Kushina, who grabbed the sword and pulled the blade from the ground, followed by the demonic Minato. Indeed, it is time to put this bad dog down, for good. After that, he plunged the blade into Naruto's stomach, causing the young blonde to let out a strangled cry of agony. The demon Kushina then skipped over to the boy who was chained. The demon Kushina watched the real one struggle and said, "Oh Naru. Chan, Naru. Chan." In a sickly sweet voice. "If only you'd been a good boy, you wouldn't be having this punishment," she said. As this thing spoke to her son with her voice, Kushina could only growl, but what the demon Kushina said next chilled her to the bone. "Now, you die," she said simply before slamming the ninjutsu into Naruto's neck, causing the boy to choke on his blood and lose consciousness. As Kushina witnessed the death of her beloved child in front of her, her horror was evident on her face. "No!" she screamed as Naruto struck the ground and the twisted versions of herself and Minato disappeared along with the vines and the chakra chains. The agitated mother hurried to her son right away and gathered him in her arms, tears streaming down her cheeks as she gazed at his tiny, motionless body, the world around them vanishing into a void of blackness. "Naruto! Naruto!" The mother saw no reaction and cradled her son's body while rocking back and forth and letting sobs escape from her throat as Kushina wailed and she attempted to wake him, but to no avail, as his eyes were rolled back and lifeless. She choked out, "Naruto! I'm sorry, I'm so sorry," in utter desperation. When a small voice sounded, "Why?" Kushina jerked her head up and looked around, only to discover that her supposedly dead child was breathing raspily. Her eyes widened in horror as she looked down at Naruto, whose face was pale and lifeless as he gazed at her with those dead eyes. "Why do you despise me?" After saying those words, Naruto's now talking corpse turned to dust in Kushina's arms, and the question it had posed began to recur repeatedly in Naruto's voice. She could only take so much before screaming at the top of her lungs for them to stop, and now that she saw Naruto standing in front of her with his skin pale and his eyes empty, lifeless orbs staring at her, he asked her again, but in a voice that sounded like a demon's. The voices grew louder and louder until they reached a crescendo, like 1,000 nails on a chalkboard. "What makes you despise me?" The end of Night Terrors. She was in her and Minato's bedroom at home when she jolted awake screaming, her clothes soaked with sweat, and she curled up into a ball against the head of the bed, remembering the terrible night terror she had experienced. Then, she heard multiple sets of footsteps, and the door flew open to reveal a worried Minato. "Kushina. Are you okay?" As Yugo, Hiruzen Sarutobi, and another Anbu wearing a raccoon mask entered the room, the fourth Hokage said anxiously, and they watched as Minato went to his wife, who appeared to have seen the Shinigami himself. "Kushina." As Minato gently attempted to put a hand on her shoulder, she jerked her head up and backpedaled until she was against the wall. Kushina, talk to me, Minato said. Knowing he had to act quickly, Minato stepped forward and grabbed the visibly upset Uzumaki, who started to struggle and flail around the distress on her face. Kushina, calm down, it's me, Minato said as he approached his wife, which seemed to frighten her even more. When she calmed down, the blonde calmly said, "Shush, Kushina, shush," and Kushina hugged her husband and started crying. It's okay, Kushina. Tell me what happened now. As she recalled the terrible scene that had just occurred in her mind, Kushina could only cry more. C.can. T. I.it was S.so. Horrible. Between sobs, she said, and Minato turned to face the other Anbu. Get Inoichi right away. Inform him that I need him here immediately and that it's an emergency. When the other four Uzumaki Namikaze children entered the room, worried about their mother, Minato gave the order, and the Anbu member who nodded disappeared in a shunshin. Only to have Hiruzen shake his head and stop them. The retired Hokage said, "It would be best if you didn't disturb your mother right now because she just had a nightmare." You four. Finish the flashback after Inoichi showed him what his wife had seen in her dreams. Kushina recalled how Minato had thrown up, reassuring her that they would never do that to Naruto, claiming to love him. Yes, we have erred, but we can improve and support our son when he gets home. In an attempt to cheer her up, Minato had told her, "We will do what we should have done all those times we failed. We just need to be there for him when he does come home." She had attempted suicide after one of those horrible nights, but was saved by her best friend Makoto Uchiha. She was then put on suicide watch for 6 months until she was deemed stable with the support of her family and therapy sessions with Inoichi. Her dreams, however, had not seemed to stop or become any less horrific. Though Yugo assured them that he didn't hate her or the rest of the family, Kushina knew that Naruto would never trust them again, especially her, and a few tears escaped her eyes as she remembered the child she had foolishly neglected and left alone because she couldn't overcome her own weakness. She had been in her oldest son's room a lot, either cleaning it up for when or if he came home or sobbing uncontrollably. She thought, "Naruto, I'm such a bad mother." A knock on her door prompted her to get up. As she wiped the tears from her eyes, she said, "I'll be right there," in a quiet voice that was loud enough for the person on the other side of the door to hear. She grinned as she opened the door because her best friend from her genin days, Makoto Uchiha, was standing on the other side. "How are you today, Makoto?" She smiled at her friend and asked. Makoto smiled back at Kushina, but she could see that her friend's smile did not reach her eyes, and she understood why. As she observed Kushina involuntarily massaging her wrists, she said, "Hello Kushina, I just came over to see how you were doing and how you were holding up." "I really have been alright, Makoto." Makoto sighed as Kushina made a conceited attempt at humor. "I don't intend to kill myself anytime soon." Kushina, knowing that nothing escaped her best friend, Uzumaki said, laughing uneasily as she scratched the back of her head. Makoto was unable to do more than shake her head. She knew that Naruto's flight had been difficult for her, and she was growing increasingly desperate as her hope of seeing him again dwindled daily. "Kushina, he will return," she said. "He may not return today or tomorrow, but I assure you that he will." Kushina sighed as she escorted her friend to the house's living room. "How would I know that he doesn't hate me for what I've done?" the depressed mother said. "I wish I was more confident about that." As Naruto stood atop his father's head, surveying the village he had left 4 years prior, he remarked, "Well, here we are." Indeed, not much has changed in the village. Ko, who was also viewing the village through Naruto's eyes and saw that it had largely remained unchanged, said, "That's for sure." Blonde nodded in agreement with his tenant. Naruto began to walk toward the Hokage's tower after saying, "Well, let's go meet the old man." He stopped at Ichiraku's for a bite to eat on his way to his father's office. As he entered the small store through the curtains separating the outside from the inside, he sat down at the counter and perused the menu. Ayame emerged from the rear and noticed a customer waiting. She rambled, "How may we help you?" while the blonde lowered the menu and placed her order. The girl dropped her pen before she could write down his order, so she just stared at Naruto. "Yeah, let me have 1 miso pork ramen." She had had this daydream before, so she rubbed her eyes to make sure it wasn't her hallucinating again, but when she looked up, he was still sitting there staring at her, cocking his head slightly, looking a little worried. Ayame couldn't believe who she was looking at, but here he was sitting at the counter. "How are you, Ayame-chan?" Naruto inquired. "Naruto." Ayame almost leapt over the counter to give him a hug as she squealed. "Ayame, what's got you so excited?" Tucci questioned coming in from the storeroom. Only to freeze mid-stride. "Is that Naruto?" He came around the counter to shake the young blonde's hand after yelling. "What time did you return?" Ayame asked, grinning at him the entire time. Naruto replied, "Just a little while ago. Have you already visited your family? They have been anxiously awaiting your return ever since you departed," Tucci inquired. As he attempted to worm his way out of the forest of death, Ayame gave him another hug and said, "When I heard that you had run into the forest of death, I thought you had died in there, but here you are safe and sound." "I'm fine, Ayame-chan," he assured her. "Just so you know about that ramen." Naruto only requested Tucci's simile. As he handed the bowl to Naruto, who devoured it with gusto, he said, "Write this one's on the house to mark your safe return home." He bid them both farewell and proceeded to the tower, where his father would be employed to manage the village. Even though Minato had asked Sarutobi to assist him, there was still a lot of paperwork to go through, so he sighed as he read another document that needed to be signed. How Sarutobi-sama survived this bullshit without help, I will never know, he thought to himself, but one thing is for sure. I'm not going to sign some bullshit that gets Naruto banished or labeled a missing nin. Minato and his family had been through a difficult 4 years since his son, Naruto, ran away from home and into Training Ground 44, also known as the Forest of Death. He had been sending Anbu search parties in there to find him, but they all returned exhausted, battered, and without anything. In addition, his wife attempted suicide, but was fortunately stopped by Makoto, who had been on her way over and caught her before Kushina could kill herself, and there had been rumors that a group of Rouge ninja calling themselves the Akatsuki had been causing problems along the border with the Hidden Rain. He cursed himself for not having the courage to face his fears and talk to his son in order to be there for him when he needed him the most, even though he knew that his son would hate him and that there was nothing he could do about it. However, his thoughts were cut short when he heard a knock on the door. As the captain of the Leaf Police Force walked into his office, Minato said, "Enter." Bowing, Fugaku said, "Hokage-sama." When he asked for tea to be brought for them, Minato turned back and smiled, gesturing for him to sit. "What do I owe you for the pleasure of visiting me today?" After placing Minato's cup on his desk, the assistant left the room and handed him a cup of tea. "I would like to talk to you about the unrest that has been growing in the Uchiha clan's ranks," he said, finishing a sip of his tea. "There have been whispers about a possible coup attempt to replace you with me as Hokage." Minato asked Fugaku directly, "So, you would like me to step in and use my power as Hokage to put a stop to it, is that it?" "Not so directly," Fugaku said. "I have called a clan meeting that will take place in 4 days' time and I would like you to be there to help get the point across." Knowing that the meeting was exclusively for clan members, Minato said, "Fugaku, you know that I can't interfere with clan affairs unless there is proof to support the claim. I am not asking you to interfere in any way, I would like you to be there as an olive branch to show the members of my clan that they have a choice: either put the good of the village first or place themselves above the village and accept the consequences that come with their actions." Fugaku responded. Minato asked, "So, you want me to be there to help make your point clear?" "Yes," Fugaku replied, getting up to look out the window. "Your presence would not only help make the point clear, but it would also let many of the clan members know that I would prefer to settle the issue amicably rather than using force." Minato looked at the Leaf Police Force captain and shook his head. As the two men conversed, their conversation veered off topic and finally came back to their families. Fugaku just med before responding to Minato's question, "So how is your family doing?" "Things are going well for the most part. Itachi is doing well in his role in the Anbu, and Makoto is doing fine as well along with my daughter Setsuna." He stopped to enjoy his tea as he went on. "But my youngest Sasuke wants to progress to fast for his own good. He seems to think that because he is a Uchiha he should be stronger due simply to that fact alone. Much like many of my clan, this arrogance will be his downfall and that of the clan if something is not done." Minato nodded, well aware that many Uchiha denigrated others merely because they were members of the clan and appeared to believe they were better than everyone else. And while they were incorrect in many respects, they were correct in others. They still needed to put in a lot of effort and develop their skills just like everyone else, so just because they had the Sharingan didn't make them superior. The value of a ninja was demonstrated by how they used their Kekkei Genkai, not by possessing it. His heart is in the right place, but his mindset and pride are holding him back. If he would only realize this. Fugaku grinned and sighed. "How are things going with your own family?" asked him. Knowing that his family was struggling and that he was to blame for his cowardice and failure to recognize his son's suffering caused Minato to slump in his chair a little. "It's been a long and hard 4 years," Minato admitted while sipping his tea. Mito blames herself for Naruto leaving and keeps saying that if only she had been nicer to him he would have stayed. Narumi on the other hand keeps waking up in the middle of the night and going to Naruto's room only to find it empty and will cry herself to sleep in his bed, And you already know what has been going on with Kushina, he said as he glanced at his desk. Hoping for some positive news, Fugaku inquired, what about Menma and Koga? Koga has been trying to get the girls to stop blaming themselves because it won't bring Naruto back any sooner, and Menma seems the least bit concerned, saying that Naruto caused this problem, he can fix it himself. Minato stopped and sighed before continuing. I mean, I knew that they were not on the best of terms, but I didn't know it had gotten this bad. While Minato was staring at him, Fugaku said, you know he will be back, it may take some time, but your son will come back. Minato shook his head and said, I wish I shared your optimism, but since the boy disappeared into the forest, no one has seen him, and the Anbu who search for him keep returning with nothing and in worse shape. It's not my optimism, it's the fact that my wife believes it, and I have learned to trust her instincts over the years when it comes to these things, he replied. He will be back, he is your son after all. A commotion outside the office cut them off before they could continue their conversation. I told you, young man. The Hokage is currently in a meeting, the guard stated firmly. You flat-chested weasel, I don't give a damn about what you say, a young voice retorted. You little punk, who are you calling flat-chested? You, I don't have time to play around with you, so get out of my way, I'm going in to see him. Release the, before the order was finished, someone yelled, wind-style great breakthrough. The door flew back, torn from its hinges, and crashed into Minato's desk along with the guard's body. The door broke in two on impact, with the top half falling to strike the guard in the head. Fugaku had just managed to move out of the way, which caused Minato, himself, and the Anbu protecting him to leap into taijutsu stances. When the man who had caused the disturbance entered, the two men turned to face him. Minato saw him and his eyes widened, seeing a miniature version of himself as a genin, albeit one with a different color jacket. As he stammered out the name of his guest, Minato couldn't help but gape like a fish. Naruto? Minato was astounded to see his son standing directly in front of him. He could see that Naruto had developed well for being in such a hostile environment and that he had endured a great deal of training. He looked into his son's eyes and saw that they were those of a dedicated shinobi, but he almost lost himself in the almost emotionless eyes. Nevertheless, because of years of training, he was able to read a tiny bit of emotion in those eyes, seeing pain and sadness mixed with resolve and something he couldn't place. Hey, are you shocked to see me, old man? Finally, Fugaku mumbled, speak of the Kyuubi. Minato concluded what Fugaku had said by adding, and you will hear its roar. With all the respect he possessed, Naruto said, Fugaku Oja-san, it's good to see you. I hope everything is going well with you and Mikoto Oba. Naruto had long known that Fugaku valued respect, so he wanted to show as much as he could to avoid offending him. The man smiled a little at this, which was a victory in and of itself. He answered, it is thank you for asking Naruto Oi. Minato started to say, Naruto, but was interrupted. To avoid speaking to his father for the time being, Naruto said, I'm here to sign up for the academy, if I'm not too late that is. He had forgiven him and the rest of the family, with the exception of Koga, with whom he had no issues, but he was not simply going to let the others get close, they would need to earn it. After a few moments of silence during which his son's casual interruption startled him, Minato was able to find his voice. Why? Indeed. However, Naruto, you must tell me what transpired in the forest, and how come we searched the entire forest and nobody was able to locate you? I'm hoping that my son will open up a bit, he said. Minato winced and the Anbu tensed as Naruto's expression changed from blank to frown, saying, I'll tell you once I feel like I can trust you. At minimum, will you return home? In the hopes that his now estranged son would at least return home, Minato asked. As long as you don't try to snoop around about what happened while I was away or have Anbu watch me, I might tell you when I think you've earned it, Naruto said, staring his father in the eyes. All right, Minato said with a sigh and a nod. However, you ought to speak with your mother. He said, your departure was hard on her. Heck, it has been hard on all of us. Minato fretted a little because Naruto didn't even flinch, but he did mentally flinch at the news, unbeknownst to Minato. As Ko responded, he thought, she took it that bad? Kami, I'm such an idiot. Still, I can't trust them yet. They need to earn my trust. As Naruto glared at his partner in his mind, the new Biju remarked, and that's why I told you to leave them a note. He said, zip it, moron, and all Ko could do was sigh. He pondered, being careful not to let Naruto hear, one day, Naruto, you're going to do something that you will forever regret. I'll make an effort to speak with her, however, be aware that she shares your situation. Minato nodded, relieved that Naruto would attempt to mend the rift with his siblings. Mito, Narumi and Menma are not off the hook either, but I will try to patch things up with them, but that will be up to them too, not just me, Naruto said. He opened a desk drawer, took out a piece of paper, and started writing on it, saying, I understand that, son. This note will let you into the class Koga and the others are in. Iruka Amino, the instructor, deserves it. He's a decent man. I'm sure you'd like to graduate alongside other students your own age. After Minato wrote down the instructions for Iruka, he sealed the letter and handed it to Naruto, who nodded as he walked over to the desk and accepted it. Minato said, I'll see you at home later, then. Naruto nodded and turned to leave the office through the doorway that had been destroyed. Minato looked at the door on his office floor and the still out cold guard, letting out a sigh he didn't realize he was holding. The Anbu nodded as they gathered up the unconscious man and anyone else outside who had been knocked out and took them to the hospital. Please get him, and whoever else was hurt outside to the hospital, and have some janitors fix the door. With a somewhat arrogant look on his face, Fugaku said, I told you never doubt my wife when it comes to these things. The statement made Minato laugh, and she said, I'll have to remember that. He sighed as he turned back to his paperwork and thought, I'm going to have to work hard to get Naruto to trust me again, but if things go well, I can atone for the mistakes I made. Iruka. Sensei was someone who made it boring, boring. Mito Uzumaki. Namikaze yawned as she listened to her class instructor ramble on and on about the history of Konoha, which she had heard 5 times. It was nice to hear the history of your home once or twice, but Iruka. Sensei was someone who made it boring, dull. Her brother and sister must be feeling the same way she was right now. Sweet Kami. Sama, help us all. Please give us a distraction so that we don't have to listen to this torture. Iruka was forced to pause his lecture to answer the door when he heard a knock at the classroom door. Mito cried anime tears of joy and mentally yelled, thank you. Her face changed to one of surprise when she saw the person on the other side enter, and then to one of shock. Naruto. She was shocked to see her brother Naruto standing by the classroom door. Despite the passage of 4 years, she still remembered him. Her reaction was not unique, though, as the other 3 Uzumaki. Namikaze's siblings also experienced similar feelings. Pardon me? Am Iruka Amino Sensei in this room 23A? The Chunin instructor blinked in perplexity when Naruto asked. How can I help you? Iruka replied, yes, that's right. Iruka took the note that his father had given him, opened it, and read the contents before his eyes widened and then turned into a smile as Naruto approached the academy teacher and handed it to him. As the blonde nodded, he said, well, Naruto-san, I must say welcome back from your training. Now, if you would take a seat next to. Let's see. You can take a seat beside Hinata. After hearing that, the girl blushed, and Naruto nodded before approaching the Hyuga heiress. Naruto sat down beside Hinata and said, hello Hinata, it's nice to meet you. Despite her shyness, Hyuga nodded her head, and Naruto couldn't help but laugh. Don't worry, I won't bite. As he put his hand on her shoulder and made her blush like a tomato, he said with a smile. The boy who watched this had brown shaggy hair, a hood with a puppy inside, tattoos of brown slits and fangs, and feral features. He growled as he glared at the blonde's behavior toward the Hyuga heiress. Kiba Inuzuka, the heir to the Inuzuka clan, was on edge because he smelled the blonde and felt in his bones that he was a threat to his position as the alpha male. Sasuke Uchiha was also uneasy about the aura the blonde was giving off, so he wasn't alone. Shikamaru Nara, who appeared bored, was actually studying Naruto. He and his friend Shoji had attempted to be friends with the blonde when he was younger, but now it was as if he were looking at a completely different person. He wasn't the only one studying Naruto, though, as Shino Aburame was observing the prodigal son of the Hokage and his friend while he was speaking with another of his few friends. All right. A new student has been added to this class by the Hokage, Iruka stated. He and a member of the bodyguard detail have been on a training trip. Why don't you take a moment to introduce yourself? To the astonishment of nearly everyone present, Naruto nodded and got to his feet, saying, my name is Naruto Uzumaki, Namikaze. I enjoy training, my friends, and ramen. Hypocrites, abusers, kidnappers, and the like are things I dislike. I want to start a family and become a great ninja in the future. My goal is to prove to my family and the villagers that I am valuable. Menma simply scowled at him, but Koga grinned to himself that his brother had returned home safely and that he wasn't just lying to his sisters the entire time. Mito and Narumi both flinched at the statement, feeling like it was a knife to the heart. With a slight smile, Iruka nodded and said, thank you, Naruto. You can sit down now. As Iruka went on with his talk, Naruto nodded and took a seat again. As the students left the academy, the remainder of the school day passed quickly. Naruto had just finished speaking with Hinata and was on his way to the gate when he heard a rough voice. "Hey!" When Naruto turned, the Inuzuka heir was standing there, glaring at him as if he were dead. "Yes. How may I assist you?" If Kiba's glare could get more intense, Naruto's bland statement caused it to do so. "Avoid being near Hinata." The blonde raised an eyebrow in response to his statement. "Why? Do you really care who I speak to?" The Inuzuka heir's face flushed red with rage at Naruto's statement. "Simply stop talking and keep your distance from her," he yelled and tried to charge at him, but he was startled by the look in Naruto's eyes, which gave him the impression that he was staring into a predator's eyes. He stated, somewhat too calmly, "I don't take kindly to people who try and attack me. I wouldn't shout at me if I were you." Naruto sighed and shook his head, knowing that the rivalry between the two of them was born from the same one that dogs and wolves had, even if the Inuzuka boy was unaware of it. While dogs were loyal to their masters and would die to protect them, wolves had no masters and were only loyal to the pack, treating each other like family. The Inuzuka simply glared at Naruto before yelling, "Humph," and running away. According to Naruto, wolves and dogs were similar to samurai in that they worked for a lord until the end of their lives, whereas wolves were more like ronin and struggled to support their families. "What on earth does that mutt believe he is?" Ko asked. With a sigh, Naruto replied, "Just let it go." Aniki. Naruto was not the kind of guy to hit a girl, least of all his own twin sisters, but he blinked as he saw his sisters Mito and Narumi coming toward him, their faces showing nervousness as if he would hit them if they said the wrong word. "Mito Imouto, yes?" Before one of his twin sisters could speak, the other two fumbled with their hands in response to his question. Narumi started to say, Anyo, would you like to?" But Naruto interrupted. "You two, walk home." He finished for her, and they nodded as both of them looked to the ground. Naruto sighed as he shook his head. Why not? At this, their heads pricked up. To Narumi's dismay, he sidestepped when she attempted to glomp onto his arm. He looked between them and said, "But I want you both to know that you are going to have to work to regain my trust, so don't think that things will be fine right away." They both nodded as they moved to stand next to their brother, thinking, things are going to be different this time. They both knew that they had contributed to the reason he had left, but this time they didn't feel like he was a stranger. In fact, the feeling they always got was almost completely gone. After that, the three siblings departed the academy grounds together and started toward their house. The three siblings were walking for a few minutes when Koga stopped them and jogged to catch up with them. When he got to them, he looked at Naruto and saw that he had changed a lot, but he was also the same as before he left. Koga had some things to say and didn't want his sisters to hear them. "Hey, could you both spare a moment?" As he handed Mito some Ryo, Koga asked, glancing at both sisters, "Why don't you get some popsicles, one for each of us, while I talk to Naruto?" After nodding, the girls inquired about their preferred flavors. Naruto answered, "Orange is fine." Koga said, "Green please." The two girls then departed. Before Naruto spoke, Koga simply stared at him for a few seconds. Naruto looked at his brother and said, "You have something you wanted to say?" "You look good for where you have been the past 4 years, he commented. "It's good to see you after all this time." "Same to you." Naruto replied, "Sorry about all of this. I know you said I should try and fix things with everyone here, but I just didn't see how to do that." "I understand why you left, but you could have left a note or something," Koga sighed. "Really, anything would have been preferable to simply getting up and walking away the way you did." When Ko said, "I told you that you should have left one, but do you ever listen to me?" "Nope." Naruto shot back, causing Ko to zip it. "All I want to know is that you are back and don't plan on running away again." He said, "I don't think anyone will be able to take it. Heck, things are bad enough already if it happened again." Koga trailed off for a second before continuing, "I don't want to think about what would happen." When he reached the end of the conversation, Koga asked, "Do you remember what I told you about what happened after you got yelled at for trying to water walk by yourself?" Koga told Naruto about everything that had happened since he left, saying that what had been happening shocked Naruto was about par for the course today. Koga had told Naruto that he had witnessed their mother tucking him into bed, saying that she was sorry for everything they had said, and that she and Minato truly loved him. Naruto recalled that this was what had prevented him from fleeing sooner rather than later. This statement had given him hope that things would improve, but after a while, when they remained the same, he finally gave up. He answered, "Yes, I remember. You now realize that it's true." You simply had to flee to show everyone how much they depended on you. With the popsicles in hand, Narumi and Mito turned the corner at this point. As they approached, Mito asked if everything was alright. The brothers nodded, and the four siblings left. They had left the academy and consumed their frozen treat 20 minutes prior to reaching their home's front gate, and once they were through, they paused at the front door. Koga saw his brother's hesitation and put his hand on his shoulder. Narumi and Mito stepped up next to him and told him it's okay, we're here for you. Naruto took a deep breath, knowing that this would be the moment of truth for his mother's reaction when she sees him. As he approached the door and turned the knob, he thought, well, it's bound to happen sooner or later. In the house itself, Kushina continued to talk to Makoto about how she could have done better with Naruto, despite the Uchiha's attempts to reassure her that, despite her actions being wrong, the Uzumaki regretted them. Kushina felt that she should have done more and that she was solely responsible for her actions. Since Makoto had arrived and the children must have returned from the academy, Kushina realized it was late when they heard the door open. Makoto noticed it too, blinking in confusion, and she was about to greet her children when she saw them enter the room with a look that told her they were being apprehensive about something. Mito said uneasily, "Hey Ka-chan, Makoto.oba," which further perplexed the two women. "Mito? What's the mat?" she said, her eyes widening as she saw someone else emerge and stand next to them. It was the same person Kushina had never imagined seeing again, grown up and dressed like a true shinobi, with her husband's cerulean blue eyes, blonde hair with a red tip, and 6 whiskered birthmarks, 3 on each side of his face. Kushina, whose eyes were on the verge of tears, took a shaky step forward, and Makoto, who had been telling him that he would return home, was in a similar situation to Kushina when she saw her best friend's son standing right here in front of them, standing next to his sisters and brother. Naruto, she said, her voice barely above a whisper as she slowly began to approach her son. Is that you?" Although Naruto remained silent, he could see that his father and brother were correct when he looked at his mother. His departure had a profound effect on her, as evidenced by the shadows under her eyes, which indicated that she hadn't slept well in a while, and the slightly noticeable scars on her wrists. He heard her cry, "S. Sochi," and as she got close enough, her tears started to fall freely. She put her hand on her mouth and shakily raised her other hand to her son's face, caressing it. My baby," he said. Despite his trust being shaken, Naruto allowed her to touch his face and did nothing to stop her. He had decided long ago that he would not be an asshole, but he would not make it too easy for his family to gain his forgiveness. He sighed as he looked at his hopeful mother's face, who was praying that it was not a dream. He said in a neutral tone, "Hi, Ka-san, it's me." That was it. Kushina knew she needed closure, so she embraced her son tightly, and he stood there giving it to her. Kushina simply shook her head as she clung to him, never wanting to let him go again. "Ka-san, I know you don't want to hear this from me, but I can't trust you and the rest of the family yet." "It doesn't matter," she replied, "you're back home, and that's all that matters." Naruto blinked at that, but as he allowed Kushina to hold him, a tiny smile appeared on his lips, and he felt genuinely delighted because he knew that this hug was one that was full of love. Unbeknownst to them, Ko was watching the entire event and couldn't help but smile because he could feel Kushina's love for his son through Naruto. He knew it would take time, but based on his father's memories, he could tell that Kushina was a strong woman who would stop at nothing to regain her son's trust. Ko kept watching as mother and son were reunited, thinking, "You should be happy, Naruto. Even though she neglected you, she still loved you like any mother would. Don't screw it up." A few days after Naruto's return, the entire village was abuzz with rumors that the Hokage's fugitive son had made it home. This sparked a number of excited outbursts, one of which was directed at the Hokage's office door, which was slammed open and 3 well-known ninja entered, 2 of whom hurried in and the third entering calmly. "Is he really back now?" As Minato set down the document he was reading to gaze at the 3 individuals now standing in the Hokage's office, 2 of them blurted out. To the surprise of Jiraiya and Tsunade, Minato grinned and said to the 3 Sannin in front of him, "Yes, Naruto came home just the other day and has been enrolled in the academy class that his siblings are in." Orochimaru stood there thinking quietly about the situation and its potential outcomes. "Do you genuinely believe he can stay up with the other students in the class? I mean, it's not exactly like he has had anyone to teach him this whole time he has been gone," Jiraiya said, glancing at his former pupil. "I want to see him check and make sure that he doesn't have anything that he could have caught while in the forest. He could spread it to the other students," Tsunade said. Naruto is fine, he has been around the other students for a few days and nothing bad has happened, no one has gotten sick and all seems to be going as well as can be expected. Minato responded to Tsunade's worries. Looking at the third person in the group, Minato remarked, Orochimaru, you have been incredibly silent. Do you have any questions of your own? Minato asked the Snake Sage a question. The Snake Sage said, his eyes not really focused on anything, questions yes but not for you, more so for Naruto. To the surprise of the other two Sannin, Minato said, well, that is going to be a bit harder than you think, he has been very tight-lipped even around us about what happened while he was gone. So, he hasn't talked to anyone since returning? When Jiraiya saw his oldest godson cutting himself off from the rest of his family, he seemed a little concerned about how he was doing. Tsunade said, somewhat dejectedly, well, what do you expect when the boy has been ignored by practically everyone in the village since he was 6, us included? The rest of them wondered what was going through the young boy's head when Minato said, he has not been totally closed off, he and Koga are still close as are the other few people who have been there for him over the years, but I don't think he has said much to anyone at all about what happened. A few months had passed since Naruto returned home and enrolled in the Ninja Academy, but ever since, the instructors had characterized him as average in comparison to many of his peers, and they had viewed him as something of an enigma, the eldest son of the Hokage, yet only marginally above average, which baffled them. Why was someone who was supposed to have been training for so long so average? In a number of the sparring sessions that were held to test the students' abilities in taijutsu, those who fought Naruto felt that he was holding back, but if that were true, what could he be holding back for? Sasuke and other students who were labeled above average also thought it was strange, as did his sisters, who were up for the top kunoichi of the class. His mother, who was determined to regain his trust, had made sure his room was well maintained, bought some replacement equipment for him from a ninja surplus store outside of the village, and dealt pain to a few shinobi who tried to pull a fast one. He claimed it wasn't necessary, but Kushina assured him that she would continue to protect him as she was supposed to, regardless of his age. He had been gradually opening up to his family since they had decided not to press him to tell them what had happened in the forest. Despite their nervousness, his sisters were able to act as informants by telling him who he should trust and who he should not trust in the Ninja Academy, primarily the students and some teachers. Among the academy students he was instructed to watch out for were, of course, Sasuke, Kiba and Izuka, who appeared to be close friends with Menma, Sakura, and the fan club she was leading. He was grateful for these tips and had expressed his gratitude to his sisters. In the months since his return, he started spending more time with Hinata, who had been gradually coming out of her shyness. The girl got along well with both him and Koga, who seemed to appreciate that Naruto was becoming more open to others. Today was the day they finally graduated from the academy and were then divided into teams. He was sitting next to Hinata, who was trying not to look at Naruto while they and their classmates waited for their sensei to arrive. Naturally, this ended when Iruka entered the room and told the students to stop talking, with a hint of murderous intent. Naruto could only smile because, despite his tough exterior, he had already grown to like the Chunin Academy instructor, who had a deep concern for his students. All right, now that I have your focus, it's time to finish the last test before you graduate. When you hear your name, you will go to the next room and be examined to see if you pass, Iruka said, picking up a clipboard. You are to perform 3 of the academy basics and if possible, a bonus jutsu you may have learned during your time here. Okay, let's start with the process of determining which students would become ninjas and which would not started then. We called each student to the next room one at a time, and when they returned, there were only a few without their hite-8 and a dejected expression on their faces. Eventually, after Hinata, Menma, Mito, and Narumi returned with their own headband, Naruto's name was called, and the young Jinchuriki got up and went to the other room. As he walked into the room, he saw Iruka and another white-haired Chunin named Mizuki, whom Naruto had absolutely no faith in because he had seen the suspicious academy teacher cast sneering glances at Hinata and his sisters. His thoughts were interrupted when Iruka spoke. Naruto nodded before continuing, okay Naruto, just do the academy 3 and a bonus jutsu if you can. Is it okay if I make a substitute before I begin Iruka? Sensei, since I have trouble doing the standard clone jutsu? Iruka blinked before nodding in response to his question. Then, to the great surprise of both Iruka and Mizuki, Naruto executed the transformation and substitution jutsu. Finally, he made a cross-shaped hand sign with his fingers before performing the shadow clone jutsu. Oh, well done, Naruto. Naruto nodded in agreement with Iruka's statement before executing another set of hand seals. Naruto called out the name of his jutsu after making the hand signs and using the least amount of chakra possible. He used the phrase, Wind-style great breakthrough, to blow a little wind out of his mouth and into the room, which was enough to make the two Chunin cover their faces and catch flying pieces of paper. Iruka took a deep breath to gather his thoughts after the gust passed and the two mid-level ninja had collected all the papers. Naruto, good job. You made it. After bowing to the two Chunin, Naruto nodded and walked forward, picking up a dark reddish, nearly black Hite.8 and wrapping it around his head before returning the room to his classmates. Come and get your Hite.8 and return to the homeroom class, he said. After Iruka finished his speech, the students filed out of the classroom and headed home, with Naruto sitting on the swing outside the academy, contemplating what to do next and who would be assigned to his team. When all was said and done, the students who received their Hite.8 were congratulated, while those who did not were told to try again next time. But his thoughts were cut short when he noticed his sister Narumi escorting Mizuki away from the crowd and starting a conversation. Curious about what they were discussing, Naruto approached the two and listened in. In addition to catching the alleged meeting spot in the forest just outside of the village, Naruto's eyes narrowed when Mizuki mentioned that she had stolen the forbidden scroll of sealing, and his gaze widened slightly, which he recognized as fear. Naruto had unsettling feelings about Mizuki from the beginning, and his gaze on some of the female students screamed the words, deceiver, and arrogant. Sadly, his sisters were unaware of how shifty he was, but they shared similar sentiments. He asked his partner, "Are you thinking what I'm thinking?" "Yeah," Ko said. "I bet anything that creep is setting your sis up." "I think it's best we keep an eye on her," Naruto replied. "We'll see what Mizuki has planned." Naruto had no idea that someone else was listening in, too. Koga, who had witnessed Narumi leave with Mizuki, had also thought the man was a creep and had gotten the same vibe from him as Naruto, but he couldn't believe that he would betray his own village or that he would even try to use his sister as a scapegoat. When Koga said in his mind, "This guy is going to be dead meat when we get through with him," a female voice could be heard in his mindscape. The female voice said calmly, "Oh, don't worry, he will wish he was dead when we are done with him." When Naruto and Koga arrived at the meeting place Mizuki had set 15 minutes before Narumi, they happened to run into each other. They were about to ask each other why they were there when the same words escaped their lips. The two brothers nodded, no longer needing to speak, and took their places to wait for that bastard Mizuki to reveal his traitorous face. With the sealing scroll strapped to her back, Narumi entered the clearing and went to the small shack Mizuki had mentioned would be there. Since she had nothing else to do, she leaned the scroll against the shack and waited. "Well, you succeeded. That's good." Narumi glared back at the cunning Chunin as she snapped her head toward the familiar voice and noticed Mizuki standing there with a sick smile on his face. "Once you tell me, you can have this," the white-haired traitor merely laughed as the red-headed girl yelled. He started to say, "Of course, my part of the deal of why you and your family and most of the village neglected your piece of she." But the girl snapped at him, cutting him off. Narumi yelled, "My brother is not a piece of shit, you asshole," Mizuki moaned in frustration. As Narumi's hold on the scroll tightened and she considered running, he remarked, "You know, I hate interrupting brats. As I was saying, the reason why your family began to neglect your dear brother," he said the word brother with a foul odor, "was because of a genjutsu that was placed on the village before you and your siblings turned 6. It was all planned by my master to make that little punk hate you, your parents, and the entire village of Konoha." Then he let out a frustrated sigh. However, that plan backfired due to the fact that the genjutsu seemed to not work on some people like your brother Koga. Not only that, but instead of hating the village, the boy ran into the forest of death to train and came back 4 years later. At this, Narumi's eyes enlarged. Therefore, the neglect of Naruto was not their fault. However, someone attempted to evict her brother. This information made her grit her teeth in rage. She drew a kunai and pointed it at the scroll, causing the Chunin's eyes to narrow dangerously. "Who placed the genjutsu? Tell me," she said, "or I'll cut this thing into this scroll to pieces and it will be useless." After a moment of silence, the Chunin smiled once more and said, "Now you wouldn't do that." He then hurried the startled girl, grabbed her hand with the kunai, and backhanded her to the ground. His smile grew larger and more menacing as he said, "Now that I got what I came for, I don't need you anymore. But first, I'm gonna have some fun with you." After dropping the scroll, he approached the stunned girl and extended his hand to seize her, only to be sent flying into a tree after being struck in the face by a pair of fists. The two brothers, Uzumaki and Namikaze, turned to check on Narumi. Narumi looked up and noticed her brothers were present, shaking her head. Naruto.ni, Koga. Narumi thanked Kami for saving her life with the help of her brothers. Mizuki snarled, What are the two you doing here? Hey, Mizuki. Teme, I see you enjoy making people's lives as miserable as always. Naruto chided. Grabbing the Fuma shuriken on his back, he yelled, "Shut up you damn bastard. I'm gonna enjoy killing the two of you, to hell with what that mummy says." At that, Koga and Naruto raised an eyebrow. Mum. As Mizuki started to spin the enormous shuriken in his hand and his face started to exhibit hints of mild insanity, they thought. Mizuki yelled, "Now die," as he hurled the shuriken at the brothers, who managed to avoid the approaching projectile by biting their thumbs and making a similar series of hand gestures, slamming their hands to the ground and swiping blood on their palms, all while yelling, summoning jutsu. A black fox with 4 white tipped tails and a large gray wolf with a white stripe like pattern down its back were standing next to the brothers when 2 plumes of smoke exploded. As her brothers hurried Mizuki with ferocious backup, Narumi gasped in surprise and watched in disbelief. With these numbers, it would be difficult for anyone to fight back against the Chunin, who were supposed to be superior to the 4. Koga and Naruto both put up a fierce fight against the Chunin traitor, effectively kicking his ass. Koga dismissed his summon with a word, and Naruto and Koga turned back to their sister after the 2 brothers sent Mizuki flying through the small shack. Naruto said, turning to face the wolf. The wolf nodded, and they started to follow Mizuki farther into the forest. Stay with her. Narumi was thinking about how her brothers had obtained summoning contracts as she watched them pursue the traitor into the woods. But before she could think about it, someone called out. Narumi. Chan. Narumi turned to see her mother approaching. Ka. Chan. She exclaimed, delighted to see her, but her brother's wolf obstructed her path and snarled at her. As the summoning wolf protected her daughter, Kushina came to a complete stop, but Narumi interrupted, saying, "Please don't hurt her, she is my mother." Looking at the wolf that was summoned, Kushina begged, "Please, she's my daughter." The summoning wolf approached Kushina and sniffed her scent. When it appeared satisfied, it looked at her, nodded, and then slowly backed up a short distance, just enough to warn her that if she attempted anything amusing, he would tear her to pieces. Narumi started crying as Kushina finally arrived at her daughter and gave her a hug. When she said, "Ka. Chan, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, Mizuki." Kushina hushed her and assured her that everything was fine before breaking the embrace and forcing her daughter to look at her with a firm expression on her face, but Narumi could tell by the look in her eyes that her mother was plotting to murder her former academy teacher. She questioned firmly, "Where is Mizuki?" And Narumi remembered before turning to face her brother, who had followed Mizuki. Kushina's eyes widened at the information before they turned determined and regained her daughter's attention. Naruto.ni. He summoned this wolf and Koga summoned a fox. Then they proceeded to beat up Mizuki before kicking him that way. She said, pointing in that direction. She stated definitively, "Listen to me. I want you to stay here with Naruto's wolf until I get back with your brothers. You understand?" Narumi nodded, and then Kushina got up and turned to face the summon. "You will keep her safe?" she asked, and the summon responded by nodding and speaking. "With my life." Before running in the same direction as her sons and the white-haired traitor, Kushina thanked the wolf. She prayed for her son's safety. Mizuki slammed against a tree, back first, and grunted. One of the traitor's eyes was swollen shut, and his body was covered in bite wounds, cuts, and bruises. "This is absurd. Genin, they're supposed to be drenched behind the ears." As Koga sat on a tree branch just beneath his brothers, Naruto stood on a branch and looked down on the Chunin traitor, thinking angrily, "But I'm losing horribly to them." Mizuki glared at the 2 teenagers, his unswollen eye growling. Whose butt he had been kicking. Naruto mockingly remarked, "TFT, and you call yourself a Chunin? You're a pathetic waste." "Shut the hell up you brat," Mizuki retorted as he attempted to become upright. Koga remarked, "It appears that he has not yet learned his lesson." Taking a kunai from his holster, the fallen Chunin roared, "I said shut up." In a futile attempt to murder the 2 brothers, however, Naruto had made 2 shadow clones without Mizuki's knowledge. One of these clones materialized and attached a knee to Mizuki's stomach, causing the white-haired traitor to gasp in agony before being thrown into the air by another Naruto clone. When the 2 brothers now emerged, Naruto was above, and Koga was with him. Naruto sent a hard right to Mizuki's solar plexus, sending him flying to the forest floor. However, Koga struck him hard with a boot to the back, sending the traitor into the front of a tree and collapsing to the ground without rising. Looking at the traitor's form, Naruto saw that he was still alive, albeit very weakly. He dismissed the clones and walked over to Koga, saying, "Okay, we may have gone a little overboard." Koga simply laughed and remarked, he had it coming. I must admit, it's not bad for two beginners. Oh. Koga, expecting another enemy turn, mirrored his brother's expression as Naruto blinked at his Biju's words before his own eyes widened, his head snapped around, and his heart fell to his stomach. Their mother was standing there, wearing her Jonin uniform, looking shocked. Both of them thought, oh snap. As their mother, still wearing a shocked expression, gazed at the two boys, Naruto and Ga stayed motionless. They all remained silent for what seemed like an eternity, but Kushina acted right away when she noticed Naruto preparing to run. As she started to approach the two boys, she said, Naruto please, while attempting to sound as composed as possible, don't run. As Kushina kept moving toward the two boys, Naruto stood motionless. It seemed like hours passed before she finally approached, knelt down to his and Ga's level, and gave her two sons a firm embrace before stepping back a little and placing a hand on each of their shoulders. It's okay. I'm not angry at either of you. Naruto, I promised you that I wouldn't ever hurt you again, and I still intend to keep it. She said with a grin on her face. I don't know how you both managed to get summoning contracts, but I'm not upset. To reassure Naruto that she meant what she said, she paused and then lightly touched his face. I know you don't fully trust me or your father yet, or even your brothers and sisters for that fact. But I won't throw away the hard work I did to win back your trust by pressing you, she said, causing the blonde's eyes to widen. Before this whole mess with Mizuki, he could still recall all the wonderful things Kushina and Minato had done to regain their son's trust. She hugged both boys close to her and said, we all love you, Naruto, which made him stiffen for a moment before he relaxed. And we'll still love you, no matter how hard we'll work to get it back, she whispered in his ear. Naruto simply nodded and remained silent as she let go of the hug. As an Anbu member arrived, Kushina glanced at her two sons and grinned a little. Before ordering Mizuki to be restrained and brought to Ibiki, Kushina assured him that everything was fine and stated that she would return to the tower. Following that, Kushina returned to the Hokage tower with her daughter and both of her sons. Standing in his father's office with his mother, Narumi, and Ga, Naruto felt anxious. Not surprisingly, the two boys' surrogate older sister Gao, dressed in her Anbu mask and cloak, was present as well as the third Hokage. The blonde was given a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Naruto suspected that he and Ga would have to describe how their summoning contracts came to be. Minato, seated behind the desk, sighed as he glanced at his son, who, despite his calm exterior, was attempting to fend off the nervousness he was experiencing at being in the spotlight, though he was somewhat relieved that it wasn't just him. He was also relieved that Homura, Kaharu, Dans, and those old crones were not present. They most likely would have put pressure on both boys to divulge all the details of how they obtained the contracts. Minato decided to speak up and start the conversation. Naruto. He replied, I know you've been back for only a few months, and that's probably not enough to earn your full trust back. Naruto tensed up a little. But one thing is for sure. You and Ga both used summon contracts that haven't been seen in the Hidden Leaf Village, or if they have, they haven't had a user in a long time. He then stopped and took a deep breath. I'm not angry with either of you, neither is anyone else. I know you would probably like to keep whatever it is you know, a secret. But please, when you feel like telling us, don't be afraid to. He then turned to face Narumi, who showed her nervousness without even trying to hide it. As for you, young lady, Minato said with a firm voice, even though we now know it was Mizuki who was manipulating you thanks to Ga's summon informing us about what was happening. You should have come to us first. What could have been so important that you would hide this from us? He inquired before continuing, if you had come to us in the first place, we could have prevented a whole lot of undue panic, stress, and worry. Despite her slight flinch, Narumi was able to respond. Everyone raised an eyebrow when she said, he had information that I wanted, and said he'd give it to me if I gave him the scroll. As the young blonde lowered her head, Hiruzen asked, information? About what, Narumi-chan? The true cause of why mostly everyone in the village neglected Ni-chan. Everyone in the room was caught off guard by that bit of information. Minato inquired, what did he tell you, Masumi? After some hesitation, Narumi finally managed to express it. The two parents and Naruto's eyes widened in surprise as she said, He said that a genjutsu was placed on the village just after we turned 6, and the plan was for Naruto.ni to despise you and force him away from the village. Of course, the plan backfired due to the fact that somehow the genjutsu didn't affect the whole village and Naruto only went into the forest of death to train to get stronger. Naruto started searching his mind for the person who might have benefited from this entire situation as soon as she finished speaking. He wasn't alone in this. Hiruzen and his father were also contemplating this. Why and by whom could the genjutsu have been placed? Since there were few people they knew who could perform jutsu on that scale and level, their suspect list was initially small. Homura, Kaharu, Dans, Orochimaru, or the masked man who led the Kyuubi to attack the village 12 years ago, just so happened to be on this list. 3 of those names, however, were immediately removed from consideration because 2 of the suspects had neglected their abilities as they became more important in their current positions as advisors. However, Orochimaru had previously been arrested on suspicion of being a traitor due to the activities that took place in the lab he ran. Following the discovery of the scene in his laboratory, he was brought to Ibiki Morino for questioning. He requested that Inochi Yamanaka examine his thoughts and use the last few hours of his life to demonstrate his innocence. They expressed regret and removed the seals that had been put on him after the truth was revealed. They discovered during the interrogation that Orochimaru had been set up by a spy who had won his trust by pretending to be a new apprentice. For Hiriko, a former Leaf Village shinobi who was exiled after his experiments on human test subjects were discovered, this spy had been pilfering data and materials from his lab. Following the incident, Jiraiya in particular and Minato both expressed regret for what they had done. Orochimaru dismissed them, claiming that they were merely carrying out their duties and that if he had been in their shoes, he would have done the same. At first, he was upset and resentful that Minato had been selected by his sensei, Hiruzen Sarutobi, to be the 4th Hokage. However, he reluctantly accepted it after Hiruzen discussed his motivations with him. He gradually came to like the man, partly because Jiraiya made him occasionally leave his lab to go out for a drink. Since he was in charge of all outgoing genin teams from the academy and had some insight into their thoughts because of his position, he was now the head of the torture and interrogation division and the primary consultant when it came to team building. One of the few individuals who could have accomplished something this significant, though, was Dans, the leader of the Anbu splinter group known as Root. He had also been adamant about having Menma, Mito, Naruto, and Narumi molded into weapons for the village. His agents would have been keeping an eye on everyone coming into and going out of the village. The advantages of obtaining a potential seal master with access to the fox's power and the Uzumaki Keke Genkai would have been too great for Naruto to resist, and if he had left the village, his men would have been ready to kidnap him and take him to his base to brainwash him into serving him and him alone. The masked individual who attempted to demolish the village 12 years prior was the other, but since that night he had been nowhere to be found. Naruto picked that time to talk. "I remember something that Mizuki said," he said, drawing the other people's attention. Something about a mummy, and what he said. Knowing that many ninja and villagers alike referred to Dans by that unflattering moniker, Minato and Hiruzen's eyes narrowed at that information right away. Before he received a confession from the old bastard, the young Hokage was on the verge of ordering an investigation into him and having him squeezed for any knowledge he might have about genjutsu. Then, before he made any snap decisions, he took a deep mental breath to calm himself. Being angry was not going to make things better. He said, "All right," and got out of the chair. "It has been a hectic night for all of us, so I think it's best we all head home for the night," said Minato. He then turned to face his 3 current children and said, "Teams will be assigned in a week's time. Be at the academy at 10 a.m. sharp." As they and Gao left the office, the 2 sons and daughter got up, followed by Kushina. Minato turned to face Hiruzen gravely after they had left. "I swear, Hiruzen," said he, "old friend of yours or not, if I find proof that it was him, I'll personally kill the mummy son of a bitch, myself." Hiruzen spoke in a neutral tone while he sighed wearily. "If Dans truly is behind the problems that you have had with your son, then we must tread lightly, Minato." He continued, "We need to find some serious incriminating evidence that it was truly him. In order to do that you must read his next move, and when you have him cornered only then do you strike." On the former Kage's advice, Minato nodded. "I know," he replied with a tired grin to the elderly gentleman. "I knew I made the right choice in making you my advisor. Unlike your former teammates, you don't pretend that your actions are for the good of the village. When you say those words you truly mean them." Hiruzen gave that a deep laugh. Before he and his successor started laughing at the reality, he said dryly, "Minato, I may love the village like my own family, but there are times when the head of the family has to put their foot down and tell the quarreling members to sit down and shut up." After the 2 men ceased their laughter, Hiruzen let out a sigh, lit his pipe, and resumed his conversation. "Why don't you go home, Minato?" replied he. "The paperwork isn't going anywhere, and you need to be with your family right now. Take the day off tomorrow." At that, Minato gave a nod of agreement. When he handed the former Kage a small bottle of sake, the old man nodded his gratitude, and Minato vanished in his trademark yellow flash. "Thank you, Hiruzen," he said, smiling, before turning to face the seemingly endless stack of paperwork. "I don't know how I would manage if you weren't here to help." In the 3 days since the entire Mizuki incident, things at the Uzumaki Namikaze residence had returned to normal? Or as normal as possible. Both brothers believed it was best to keep some things to themselves and others secret for as long as possible, so Naruto and Ga had decided to only share the essentials of their summon contracts with Minato and Kushina. This appeared to allay most worries and or provide answers to the majority of Minato and Kushina's inquiries. After Naruto discovered that his family had been under genjutsu the entire time, things even appeared to improve somewhat. Even though he still hadn't forgiven them completely, he felt that they had earned some good faith, which led him to tell them about his summon contract. Ga had assured him that doing so would help to ease the tension between Naruto and his parents, so he finally followed his brother's advice and told them. Naruto decided to try being a little more open, so he accepted his sister's offer to go shopping with them and Kushina that week for new clothes. The girls thought of the idea as a way to spend time with him and get to know him better. They discussed who they wanted to be on a team with as they strolled through the village, but Kushina had warned them that they should be prepared to work with anyone because they might be paired with any student in their class. They finally arrived at their destination and stopped in front of a store called Shinobi Style. The eyes on the sign were kunai knives, and the Y was a shuriken that was positioned so that it appeared to be protruding at an odd angle. As they walked into the store, a bell tinkled, and a woman emerged from the rear to inquire if they needed assistance. She grinned upon realizing it was Kushina and her daughters. When the women saw Narumi and Mito, they said, "Well, if it isn't Kushina, I was wondering when you would be back, come to get some ninja gear for your girls." Kushina gestured to her son and said, "Nice to see you too, Rika." "Yes, we are here to get gear for them and Naruto." After passing around the counter, the women approached Naruto, who smiled and held out her hand before saying, "It's nice to finally meet you, I've been wanting to for a long time." "It's nice to meet you too, Rika-san." Naruto shook the outstretched hand and said, before her smile became a little too mischievous, similar to Anko's expression before she pulled a practical joke on Naruto. Using her other hand, she grabbed a handful of the boy's hair and tugged just enough to cause Naruto to wince in agony. "Naruto, none of this san business, just call me Rika, okay?" she said, her smile somewhat too sweet. In response, Naruto said, slightly pained yes. She released his hair at this point, ruffled his hair, and turned back to Kushina with a genuine smile. Rika inquired as to whether they had a specific search in mind. "We need to get clothes for both Naruto and the girls," Kushina said with a smile. Rika noticed that the girls were grinning as they examined some of the clothing in the store, and that she had specifically called out Naruto. This was all a ploy to get Naruto to spend time with them outside the house and, hopefully, strengthen their bond. She smirked to herself. It's possible that the boy was aware of this but chose not to express it aloud. Rika couldn't contain her laughter. Additionally, she saw that Menma and Ga were not present with them. She was about to inquire, but Kushina interrupted her. "Menma already went shopping a day or two ago and got some clothes, so he doesn't need any, and Ga told me that he would go shopping with us on another day." Rika chose not to bring up the subject after noticing the tone of Kushina's voice and learning from her that Naruto and Menma didn't seem to get along and that the Uzumaki Namikaze boys got on. Kushina wanted to help her estranged son get closer to her and his sisters and prevent her sons from fighting. Rika was among those who had not been completely impacted by the genjutsu, but she had never tried to speak to the boy because he had never visited her store until one day when he was briefly examining the window and she went to ask if he would like to come in and look around. The boy had left. She pondered how to get him to open up now that he was in her store. Rika looked at the boy and said, "So, do you have any ideas of what you would like, Naruto?" Naruto looked around and said, "I don't really know, what do you suggest?" or something similar. Looking at the girls, Rika grinned and made the decision to involve them, saying, "I think we need to get you a style all your own, don't you think so, you three?" The three of them gazed at the boy, and Kushina grinned along with her two daughters. "That sounds like a great idea. Do you have any colors you would like, Naruto?" Kushina said. After giving it some thought, the boy said, "I like blue and orange." "Any others?" Kushina asked, raising an eyebrow at the color options but wanting to let him choose for himself. With his chin in his hand, the boy pondered before answering, "Black." Rika laughed and responded, "We can work with that, but I think it will be easier if we give you some outfit pairings and see what looks the best on you." After changing into a few different outfits, Naruto left with the newest one, and the girls all nodded in agreement as Naruto was instructed to check himself in the mirror. The boy was dressed in an outfit that included a pair of light gray ninja cargo shorts, a pair of shinobi shoes, and a midnight blue shirt that was almost black in the right light. The shirt featured an orange Uzumaki spiral, which was the primary concession to his choice of color, along with two small orange stripes on the edge of his sleeves. When Naruto inquired about a pair of dark blue wrist guards with an underlayer of armor, Rika replied that they would complement the ensemble and provide an extra degree of protection. Overall, the girls approved of the ensemble and thought it looked good on him. Kushina then covered the cost of Naruto's clothing as well as the items the girls had chosen. The foursome then left for lunch. Minato and the other two Uzumaki Namikaze boys had just finished placing their lunch order when they got to Ichiraku's. He grinned as his wife and the rest of his children entered, allowing the four of them to order lunch and find a seat. After everything was finished, he asked his question. He smiled at his wife and asked, "So, did you guys have a good time?" Kushina looked at her husband and said, "We did, and we got Naruto a new look. What do you think?" Minato looked at his son and had to concede that Naruto looked good in his new attire. With a sniff, Manma questioned, "Why? It's not like Naruto is going to be put on a team." Both Kushina and Minato gave their son a look and advised him to keep his thoughts to himself if he had nothing kind to say. Menma continued to believe that even though his brother had returned, he would not be saying sorry to his elder brother until Naruto could be considered on par with him. Although there was a tiny part of Menma that genuinely wanted to reunite with his brother, that part was struggling with the aspect of him that had been able to establish itself because of the circumstances that had led up to this point. He had no idea, though, that Naruto was already on par with him, if not superior. Naruto had never wanted to stand out at the academy because he believed that it would raise too many questions that didn't need to be asked until he was ready to share the answers. This is why Menma was unaware of this fact. However, there is always a possibility that someone will figure out what you are doing, and it appeared that Orochimaru had become aware of the situation, even prior to the entire Mizuki incident. Rewind: when Naruto arrived at Ichiraku's for lunch that day, he was greeted by a person who was a little too astute to miss a pattern. Naruto nodded when Orochimaru greeted him and inquired if he was getting ramen. As the two entered, Ayame saw her favorite blonde and smiled to greet them. Naruto ordered a bowl of tonkatsu with extra chashu and kakuni, while Orochimaru ordered a plain bowl of chicken ramen with miso. The snake sage asked if it was okay if he joined him, and Naruto said that it was. After a few moments of silence, the two were interrupted by a question. Orochimaru said, "Naruto, may I ask you a question?" After giving him a brief glance, Naruto responded, "And what question might that be?" before posing his own query. In an attempt to get the blonde to share, the snake sage said, "I know you have only been back 3 months, but I would like to ask about how things are going at the academy." Once more, Naruto responded to the question with one of his own. "What about the academy?" "It's about you, more specifically your performance at the academy," Orochimaru said as he went on. "You seem to be somewhat of an enigma to your instructors, as you seem to be the same as any average student who attends the academy." Wondering where his godfather was taking this, Naruto raised an eyebrow and asked, "And is that bad?" "No, many ninja who were average in the academy have gone on to be good shinobi," he continued, "but it makes you seem like you are hiding something, since many of them think you're holding back when it comes to how you perform." After finishing his meal, Naruto got up to pay, but his godfather stopped him and put down money for the two of them. Naruto simply shrugged and turned to face the older ninja, saying, "I don't know what to tell you." The end of the flashback. Following this, Naruto worked a little harder at the academy, which raised his scores somewhat but not enough to significantly alter his rating. It was done merely to give the impression that he was that ordinary. However, neither Orochimaru nor some of the teachers there were convinced. He couldn't help but ask himself, "Naruto, what are you not telling us, and why are you trying to hide your real level of skill from us?" as he and Minato reviewed team assignments in the Hokage's office. As Orochimaru showed Minato a diagram with several distinct team compositions, including tracking, assault, and support, he asked, "So, Minato, what do you think of these for the potential team builds?" He displayed a chart that listed the candidates who could perform multiple roles in a squad after highlighting those whose skill set would only allow them to fill one position. In the past, squad building was a challenging process that essentially involved putting genin together and determining whether or not they would work as a team. Minato said, "So far the teams look great, thank you Orochimaru." However, squads put together in the last 2 years have had a 92.7% success rate in squad dynamics since Orochimaru provided his perspective on the subject. "But I am concerned about one thing. However, Orochimaru had a hunch as to what it was about, so he wasn't shocked. His suspicions were confirmed when Minato rubbed the back of his head in shame. "It's over your children, isn't it?" he asked. Orochimaru sighed when he heard Minato say, "You caught me, Orochimaru. I wanted to know why Naruto's name isn't on any of the squad suggestions that you showed me." Orochimaru knew this was coming. "Minato, you and I both know that your oldest son was treated like he never existed by both his family and most of the village, myself included. Though we know now that it was due to a genjutsu that no one knew about, it is because of that he doesn't trust many people. He doesn't even fully trust you or your wife right now for that matter," Orochimaru said, as Minato was about to him. "Do you know how he performed in the academy, Minato?" When Minato heard the question, he scowled and nodded, wondering where the Sannin was taking this. "I do, Orochimaru. From what I hear from practically everyone, he's about as average as they get at the academy. His performance on the written and physical exams bring passable marks. It's actually a surprise that he didn't place higher than he did," Minato said in a voice filled with shame and guilt for the fact. He was well aware that although his son had trained, he had no one to impart the necessary knowledge to him. However, he also wanted to know how Naruto was able to perform some of the jutsu he had used and how someone who appeared to be so ordinary had survived in the Forest of Death for so long if his son was so ordinary. After Minato shook his head in response, Orochimaru pulled out Naruto's file and gave it to him. "That being said, have you ever seen his actual scores and performance on the written and physical exams?" He took it, opened it, and failed to see what the Snake Sage was attempting to suggest. However, he scowled a little when he saw his son's performance. He sighs when he realizes Minato didn't understand. "You don't see it, do you, Minato?" asked the man. "Isn't it suspicious that his grades aren't more varied? How on every single exam, physical and written, he has managed to score just enough points to put him in the average threshold? That alone warrants suspicion. It's as if he is deliberately trying to make himself look like the most average shinobi in order to conceal his strengths." He stopped and let Minato consider it for a moment. After giving it some thought, Minato said, "Are you sure about this? After all, we both know that he didn't have anyone to train him while he was in the Forest of Death. Now that I'm thinking about it more clearly and looking back at how after I talked to him about it his scores went up but not enough to change his placement, I'm sure that he's intentionally hiding his skills. Though for what reason, I'm not sure," Orochimaru said with his brows furrowed. If Naruto was as skilled as Orochimaru was portraying him to be, Minato simply couldn't understand why he would purposefully conceal his abilities. But why hide his skills? I mean, I get why he didn't want to tell us about the summon contract and all, but if he has the skill, why doesn't he show them to everyone? Minato requested only that Orochimaru give an acknowledgement. "It sounds as if you're making him out to be a prodigy. If he was, he'd be the talk of the village." As soon as Orochimaru completed his assessment, Minato gave him a furious and accusing look. "That's why I didn't place him with any of squads that I made, Minato. I don't want you to take this the wrong way, but my personal assessment of him is that he's a potential risk. He trusts only a few people in the village and because of that has very little loyalty or love for the village either." Minato was upset that Orochimaru believed his son posed a risk to the security of his ninja and village. "What are you implying, Orochimaru? Are you saying that my son is a potential threat to his squad mates, his sensei, and possibly a threat to the village?" He kept thinking about Menma's remark that his brother wouldn't be placed on a team. Given what had transpired, he was aware that his son wasn't receiving the best treatment, but he wouldn't betray the village, would he? The two were already standing and in combat stances when why? Gao burst through the office door before the question could be answered. They only slightly relaxed when they saw who it was, but the kunoichi's expression indicated that it wasn't good. "Why?" Gao said. "Hokage-sama, I need to talk to you now, it's about Naruto." Minato felt a chill go down his spine, hoping that Orochimaru's earlier remark had not been important. Rewind. Why? Gao had been en route to administer Naruto's academy graduation gift. She bought the twin kamas because she thought they would be ideal for Naruto and had discovered them while searching for a set of presents for her two surrogate little brothers. Because they were also chakra blades and had exquisite craftsmanship and detail, the pair was unique. She had previously presented Ga with his gift, a personalized wakizashi that doubled as a chakra blade crafted by the same smith. She also wanted to ensure that Naruto received his gift. Since no one else currently knew where he was, she headed for the one location she knew he would be. Before long, she arrived at the unique training location that Ga and Naruto used when they wanted to train alone or simply be by themselves. In order to avoid being noticed and or picked up by Ga using his senses, if he had any, she had located the location by following him from a distance. When the boy stopped, he arrived at the clearing she was going to, where she discovered Naruto waiting for his brother and the two training together, which served as the ideal cover for her to slip past. She quickly found herself landing in the clearing after recalling the path to the location. She was met by two voices when she arrived, one of which she recognized as Naruto's and the other of which she didn't recognize at all. Before Naruto asked the women he was with to sing, she only heard the final few words of the conversation. She looked at him, then sighed and said, "Okay." "Why?" Gao froze as the women started singing so exquisitely that it seemed they could have mesmerized anyone who heard them. When the woman sang, "Why?" Gao could have sworn she heard the song's music playing simultaneously. After the song ended, she heard Naruto remark that the woman's voice was among the most exquisite he had ever heard. Women thanked him for the compliment, as stated. When Why? Gao approached, he could see that Naruto was lying on his side with the woman sitting next to the stream that meandered through the area, with his head resting on her leg. Why? Gao used the body flicker technique to get away and race at full speed to the Hokage's office so as not to startle them. Final flashback. It was surprising when Minato's response was a little lackluster after she had reported what she had witnessed. When Minato learned that his son was seeing someone, why? Gao didn't know. He recognized the song. It was a lullaby from a fairy tale story Kushina used to read to the children when they were young. Minato was also aware that Kushina had hummed and even sung that lullaby to the children numerous times when they were afraid or unable to fall asleep. Who was this woman if it wasn't his wife who was singing? Orochimaru considered what had just been said and whether this woman was a treat for the village as he considered this. Then he had a thought and made the decision to express it. If we have Inoichi take a look at why Gao's memories, we can see who this person is and if your wife or you know her. Minato. Why? Gao nodded her head and disappeared again using body flicker when Minato said, "Very well, I will get Kushina and bring her here." Why? Gao. If you would be so kind as to retrieve Inoichi so we can determine what to do about this. After an hour and a mind walk, Minato told Inoichi that he could go home, but he doubted the second of the two because he knew very well that his son, even though he was far away, had a way of knowing when and when not to trust someone, and he felt that if he didn't trust his son, it was almost like betraying all the work he put into trying to win back his trust. After learning everything he could from Gao's memory, Minato offered to take Kushina home, but she told him that she needed time to think, and that the walk home would help her do just that. Now, it was just him, Orochimaru, and Gao in his office. Orochimaru gave in after observing Minato's conflicted feelings about the situation, in addition to his attempts to determine the identity of the woman and what his son was doing. Minato, I'll assign Naruto to a squad on the condition that. Gao interrupted him before he could finish, saying, "Please, Hokage-sama, I would like to be the sensei for Naruto's squad." Orochimaru would have preferred to put Anko in charge of Naruto's squad because she would be able to report on his mental state just by observation alone, and the only other people who could do so were himself, Jiraiya, Tsunade, Ibiki, and Shizune. However, he didn't think that they should be removed from their posts for one genin, even if that genin is possibly unstable and the Hokage's son. Minato and Orochimaru blinked at the sudden outburst, but he had to admit that the idea appealed to him because it would allow him to keep an eye on his son and help him feel more at ease by being around someone he knew well. In an attempt to win Minato's approval, Gao said, "I know Naruto better than most in the village and can assess his mental state firsthand. I will be able to see if anything is amiss." "Well," Orochimaru said, "I think it could work if you think it is a good idea." Minato considered the situation carefully. On the one hand, he wanted to believe his gut that his son wasn't a threat, but on the other hand, he knew that Orochimaru's statement that he should only trust a select few people in the village was undoubtedly true because he knew the list was short. Eventually, he had to put his village before his son, as much as it hurt, but he would do it his way. "Alright, Gao, but I want to make two things clear first. There will be no favoritism towards Naruto," he said, observing a wry smile on her face as he paused. He could only hope that this decision wouldn't backfire because Gao and Anko were close friends and shared some of the same interests and tendencies. Secondly, if anything is amiss, even if it seems trivial, don't hesitate to bring it to my attention. Am I clear? Gao's smile remained fixed on her face as she answered, 100%. "All right, let's rebuild the squads now that we've resolved that." As they worked through the remainder of the afternoon, Minato, Orochimaru, and Gao were asked to recommend Naruto's team. They rearranged the teams to make the best pairing that would ensure the highest rate of survival for the young genin. Starting with the ones who have the most flexibility in regard to possible positions, Orochimaru said, pulling out a rooster before going on to highlight and circle prime individuals. When the time for team assignments finally arrived, Naruto and his siblings were on time, and the other students filed in until the entire class was present. A short while later, Iruka entered the room, halted the class's chatter, and started to explain that they were about to embark on their journey to become great shinobi in kunoichi. So the lengthy process of team assignment started. Now then, Team 1 will be? During this process, Naruto listened to Iruka as he discussed with Ko who he hoped to be paired with on a team, but Ko informed him that he would have to try to work with whoever he was paired with, even if it wasn't the person he got along with the best. Iruka continued by identifying the teams that would have the most well-rounded genin teams: Menma, Mito, and Narumi Uzumaki. Namikaze will make up Team 7. Although the three siblings named face-palmed at the misfortune of having to stick with their siblings even when out on missions and of having to deal with their perverted and habitually late older brother figure as their sensei, many groans and complaints erupted at this statement about the newly dubbed strongest team, Team Hokage's kids. Team 8 will consist of Hinata Hai, Ga, Kiba Inuzuka, and Shino Aburame, Iruka said after calming the class down again. Kurenai Y. Hi, your sensei. Last year's Team 9 is still in place. Ino Yamanaka, Shikamaru Nara, and G. Akamichi will make up Team 10. Shikamaru muttered a low, troublesome behind Ino as she complained about being assigned to the worst team, nearly smashing her head against the desk she was at. Your sensei, Asuma Sarutobi. Team 11 will consist of Sasuke Uchiha, Sakura Haruno, and Sai your sensei, Richi, Iruka said, his eyebrow twitching slightly at the impolite behavior of his students. However, he was again interrupted when Sakura shouted out of her seat and pumped her fist in the air, declaring that the power of true love prevails over all obstacles, as Sasuke dropped his head. The final team will be Team 12, which will consist of Yakumo Kurama, Ga, and Naruto Uzumaki. Namikaze, Iruka said, teasing his students' actions for the last time before announcing the final squad. Iruka then declared that their sensei would be arriving shortly to pick them up. Your sensei, why? Gao Izuki. As Iruka left the room, a girl with brown hair braided on one side and light brown eyes approached the two. She was wearing a stylish yet functional purple kimono style top with a pink sash at her waist, a blue skirt underneath, and a red mesh shirt. That caught Naruto off guard as he wondered if his dad had done this on purpose to keep an eye on him or was it his dad's way of trying to help him. Quite seemed to fall over the room as several of the other students looked back at Naruto before they, along with the rest of the students, got up and moved to group up with their respective teammates. Hello, my name is Yakumo Kurama, she said, bowing slightly as she went on. It appears that we will be teammates. Naruto and Ga both nodded and asked her to sit next to them. As she sat down, Yakumo couldn't help thinking about Naruto. Did he really go into the forest of death like Narumi and Mito claim he did, and if so, how had he survived? Also, if Naruto had made it out of that supposed death trap, then why was he so average? These thoughts played in her mind as she sat next to them as they waited for their sensei to arrive. Being one of the few people who hadn't been affected by the mass genjutsu, she had noticed how people just seemed to ignore Naruto. Even his sisters ignored him, even avoided him at times, which she thought was weird. When she had asked Narumi why, her friend told her that every time she would get close to her brother it was like an overwhelming sense of fear would wash over her. Yakumo had thought she was being absurd, but after having seen the way Naruto was treated by the village and his family, she was not surprised when Narumi told her that Naruto had ran away. But now that he was back, it seemed like whatever had been causing Narumi to feel that sense of fear was gone. Honestly, when she had been told that it had been genjutsu, many of the pieces that she had been missing had fallen into place, and now she knew why things had been so rough for Naruto. She had made a promise when he had gone into the forest that if he ever came back she would befriend him, and now being put on his team gave her the opportunity to keep her promise. A woman with purple hair entered the room after the majority of the teams had been picked up by their sensei, leaving only 3 teams. Why? Gao smiled when she saw her 2 surrogate younger brothers, and they returned the smile. As she took note of who was left, she mentally noted that if Kakashi was as late as usual, she would burn his stash of Ichi Ichi Paradise books while forcing him to watch. At that moment, somewhere in the Leaf Village, a certain masked shinobi felt a chill run up his spine, sensing that his prized book collection was in danger. With that mental note, she commented for Team 12 that she was their sensei and that they should follow her. As the 3 got up to follow her, Naruto made a shadow clone and gave him a piece of paper and told him to read it when after they left. The rest of his siblings and the others waiting quirked an eyebrow at what that was all about, but eventually shrugged and went back to waiting. Why? Gao didn't ask what the clone was all about, she simply told the three that she had to use the bathroom and went inside. When she did, she placed a sound seal and made a shadow clone who used the transformation jutsu to take the form of a fly. As she released the sound seal, she flushed the toilet and washed her hands to make it look real. When she walked out, the fly left, as well as the four of them left. The fly made its way to the room where the others were waiting. As she entered through the open window above the door, only to find the clone setting up an elaborate trap on the door. Only the clone and the other three Uzumaki Namikaze kids were left. As Gao's clone saw what he was doing, she approved and decided to watch the result of Naruto's trap and settled in to wait. Gao led the three out of the school and sat down on the stone steps that led to a small pond. She looked at each of them and said, "Okay, I want each of you." However, before she could finish, Naruto tackled her to the ground, and Gao simply grinned because Yakumo never imagined that Naruto would ever display such emotion. Why? Gao grinned as she stood up, still hugging the bewildered girl. "It's good to see you too, both of you, but you are confusing Yakumo," she said, gesturing to the bewildered girl. Naruto scratched the back of his head and sat down again. "Why?" Gao looked at her students and said, "Pardon my oath? 'Tis action, but we are close." Yakumo was perplexed by the statement because she knew that Gao and Naruto were not related, but she decided to overlook it because she remembered how the boy had hugged her. Perhaps she and he saw each other as family. "Now that you are all aware that I am Gao Azuki and that I will be your sensei, I would like each of you to share your name, interests, and goals for the future. As I mentioned before, my interests include Kenjutsu, moonwatching, my surrogate younger brothers here, and a certain someone I won't discuss with you." Naruto chuckled a little at this, but Gao's slight glare cut him off, and Gao grinned at his brother's situation as she went on. "I detest sexists, child abusers, rapists, and hypocrites." She looked at them all and smiled at the end, saying, "My future goals are to marry that special someone and train you three into great shinobi. Now, who wants to go next?" she inquired. Before she could say anything, Naruto raised his hand and began. "My name is Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. I like wolves, training, ramen, and on-chan. I don't like hypocrites, rapists, sexists, child abusers, and poachers. My goal for the future is to become a skilled ninja and demonstrate my value to my family." Gao nodded, fully aware that Naruto's resolve was unquestionable because she also understood its source. As the group's next in line, Gao went next. "My name is Gao Uzumaki Namikaze, and I like ramen, training, on-chan, and shogi. I dislike the same things as my brothers do. My future aspirations include finding a nice girl and starting a family someday, as well as becoming as strong a ninja as possible." Both Yakumo and Gao were taken aback by the boy's final statement because they never imagined that he would wish to start a family. Gao turned to Yakumo after Gao was done, saying, "Looks like you're up, tell us about yourself." Yakumo felt like a bug under a microscope at this point, but it could have been worse because she knew that freezing now would only demonstrate her unfitness as a leaf shinobi. "My name is Yakumo Kurama, and I enjoy reading, spending time with my family, mochi, and training with my tutor Kurenai Sensei. I also detest those who look down on genjutsu practitioners, perverts, rapists, and those who make fun of others for foolish or uncontrollable reasons. I want to surpass Kurenai Sensei as a genjutsu master and give back to Minato and Kushina Sama for helping me defeat the Ito in my head and regain my life." As she gazed at the girl, Gao thought, wanting to surpass Kurenai is definitely a tall order, but this girl seems determined as hell. After a moment, she looked at the three of them and remarked, "Good, very good." Her expression then became serious. "Now for you to know something." The trio blinked in surprise when the statement was made. "The graduation test you took last week is not the real graduation test." "On-chan, what do you mean by saying that it wasn't the actual test?" Confused by her statement, Naruto inquired. "The test you all took was not the actual test, as I previously stated. Only 3 or 4 teams will pass the real test, which has a 60.6% failure rate," she added. "So, I want you 3 to show up at Training Ground 12 tomorrow at precisely 7:30 a.m., she said. "Good, then you have the rest of the day to yourselves." They nodded, indicating that they understood, and she vanished, leaving behind a few leaves that had been blown away by the wind. "Eat light, because if you don't, you'll regret it." The 3 young shinobi in training exchanged glances after Gao left, and then Naruto said, "You two want to get some ramen or something? While we eat, we can converse and discover what we can all do." The three of them headed to Ichiraku Ramen after Yakumo and Ga nodded. As they entered the small ramen stand, Ayame was setting down the box she had been moving when she turned to see the three of them sit down. Naruto, nice to see you. Where will you be returning? Oh, and this must be the rest of your team, correct? Ayame inquired in her typically vivacious manner. Naruto picked up a menu to see what he wanted to order and said, "Yup, and on. Chan is our sensei." As she opened the box she had just put down, she said, "That's wonderful. It's good to see you too, Ga. How have you been lately?" "Good, Ga said with a smile, "and you?" The two of them laughed when Ayame smiled and said, "Very good, since one of my favorite customers has been back." "Oh, how impolite of me. What's your name?" "My name is Ayame." As Yakumo turned from Ga and Naruto to Ayame, she inquired, "I assume you all know one another?" "My name is Yakumo Kurama," she asked, and Ayame gave her a nod in agreement. As the two boys turned to face her with sarcastic mockeries, Ayame remarked, "Yup, I've known these two and the rest of their family for a long time, since the whole Uzumaki Namikaze clan seems to love ramen." "Now that's just not true, Ayame-chan. We don't love ramen, we just happen to like it a lot," Ga responded. When the four of them finally calmed down, Ayame took their orders and served them their food. When asked where her dad was, she told them that he was out on a supply run and would be back later. As the trio talked over their bowls, they discussed their strengths and weaknesses and shared a little more about themselves. When everything was finished and they had finished their ramen and learned a little more about each other, they said that they would do their best on tomorrow's test and left for home. Those who knew Kakashi knew that this was just one small way he honored one of his friend's memories, but if one did not know him from the many rumors that surrounded him, they would say that he was a shinobi just for the sake of being one. Back at the academy, Kakashi was simply strolling down the hallway in silence while reading his newest addition to his library. Kakashi stopped by the door and felt a slight sense of murderous intent emanating from all three genin. Wondering what his surrogate siblings would do to punish him for his tardiness, Kakashi made a shadow clone and had it enter the room. When the clone vanished and the memories returned to him, he recoiled in relief because he was now very happy that he had made the clone. He was aware that he was late, but that was one thing he didn't want to happen again, either in memory or in real life. When he walked through the door, a note was lying on the floor, and the white-haired ninja bent to pick it up. He turned the note over and read it, and it sent a chill down his spine. He saw a semi-war zone, with several different types of kunais scattered on the lower and upper wall near where the clone had been, as well as ninja wires scattered on the floor, a little more around the middle of the small pile. He thought to himself, never piss off I-sensei's kids again, recalling how terrible it was to have the ninja wire cut into his genitals, tying him up in a very painful way, and his favorite book soaked in what appeared to be oil. Where had they gotten the oil? Kakashi could only speculate, before a match struck a hard surface, and alighting the wire and his favorite book. To Kakashi, this is your only warning before something bad happens to that pile of smut you call a book collection. Try to be on time from now on. You have no idea what On-chan would do to you, so if I don't burn that smut, you can bet she will, or she will do something much worse. If you are reading this message, you used a shadow clone or a substitution to fall for my trap, as I figured you would. I hope it was a clone so that you at least know what it felt like. Regards, Naruto. P.S. You are Nin, and now you are acting like a sensei, so don't waste your time with some flimsy excuse about a black cat crossing your path or how you got lost on the way to meet your team. At this point, two things went through Kakashi's mind as he looked up from the note. One, nothing could be worse than having his prized book collection be burned. He would rather die than have that happen. Two, where was Naruto? Looking around the room to see if he could figure out where Naruto was hiding, because there was no way he would miss a chance to view his handiwork in person. As he looked around, said blonde's clone in fly form decided to have some fun as he buzzed by Kakashi's ear and landed on the back of his neck, only for the clone to be dispelled when Kakashi slapped himself on the back of the neck to try and kill the supposed fly. Why? Gao's clone, who had also taken a fly form, on the other hand, flew out the open window and dispelled itself where no one would see it. Kakashi thought that he must have missed and that the fly flew off to somewhere else. Looking now to the three genin, who were all somewhat amused by their brother's antics, even Menma Kakashi told them to meet him on the roof and that he would be waiting before disappearing in a puff of smoke. As they continued to walk home, Naruto noticed that Kakashi couldn't stop smiling after receiving the memory from his clone. Ga asked, "What's so funny?" "Nothing," said Naruto, "just remembered something that I found funny, that's all." When morning finally arrived, Naruto got up early and prepared for the test that day by heading to the bathroom while he still had the opportunity. Fortunately, the Uzumaki Namikaze estate had 3 bathrooms, 2 for the kids and 1 for the master bath off of Minato and Kushina's room. After taking a quick shower, Naruto found Ga eating a small amount of fruit salad and that his brother had prepared 2 bowls, one of which he pushed over to the seat next to him. Naruto grinned and accepted the bowl, which he ate with gusto. Naruto knew that his brother might not be as skilled as their mother, but he was still quite good at cooking, if you can call it that. After they finished their meal, the 2 boys got the rest of their gear that they would need for the test, strapping their kunai pouches and such into place. They both headed for the front door, only for Kushina to be waiting by it. When she saw them, she smiled and hugged them as she told them, "Good luck and do your best." With that, she stepped back and watched as they walked out the door and headed to Training Ground 12. Along the way, Yakumo met up with the 2 brothers and the trio made their way to the training ground together. When they got to the training ground, it happened that they were about 20 minutes early, but that didn't bother the 3 as they knew they were going to be early when they had left for the training ground. When they did, since they had a bit of time to burn, Ga took out a small storage scroll and unsealed a shogi game that was already in progress and sat down with Naruto sitting opposite him to finish the match. Yakumo sat down next to them and asked when they had started the game, to which Naruto replied, "Last night." As this was going on, Gao watched from a tree in the training grounds forest, happy that her team had arrived early, demonstrating that they took this seriously. Having arrived approximately 5 minutes ahead of her team, Gao had wanted some privacy, but she didn't mind sharing it with the young genin because she wanted to see how they would act without her around. So far, it seemed like her team got along just fine, but she was unaware that Naruto had detected her chakra when they arrived. He chose not to tell the others so as not to ruin the look he would get from his Chan when he told her he knew where she was the entire time. After 20 minutes had passed, Gao entered the training grounds clearing and approached her team. Looking at the 3 genin, Gao remarked, "It's good to see you all here and early. That is also good. That means that you take this seriously." Gao and Yakumo blinked and stared at Naruto when he said, "Come on, Chan, you were in the trees the whole time watching us?" Ga simply grinned, knowing full well that his brother was a sensory type and that he would never be able to match Naruto's skill in this area. Although he was able to sense chakra, his senses were not as keen as Naruto's. But then again, this is Naruto after all. The boy who defies logic, Gao thought, a little taken aback by Naruto's ability to sense her as if it were something casual. After taking 2 silver bells out of her pocket and hanging them in front of her genin, Gao said, "Okay, since it seems that everyone is obviously ready to start, let's go over the rules." Gao attached the bells to her belt and said, "The rules to this test are simple. All you have to do is get these bells from me before the timer runs out." She had placed a clock timer on the stump she was standing next to, and the clock was already ticking. "If none of you get a bell by lunch, then you will be tied to one of the 3 stumps while I eat my lunch, and after that you will have a second chance to get the bells. If you fail, then you will be sent back to the academy." Yakumo flinched at this, and Ga simply scowled, thinking that since there were only 2 bells, one of them would have to return to the academy regardless of who won, indicating that the test was not really about the bells and that it had to be about something else. Naruto was already thinking the same thing and had already concluded that the test was about what they could do as a team, not who won, and that they needed to quickly come up with a plan. Gao looked directly at the 3 of them and said, "Oh, and one last thing, come at me with everything you have, because if you don't you won't win." And the test already started. The 3 genin then dispersed into the trees. Once in the trees, Naruto and Ga decided that they needed to meet up with Yakumo, but that if they grouped up, it would be too easy for Gao to find them, so they both made shadow clones and sent them to where they could sense her chakra was coming from. Yakumo was crouched behind a tree that gave her an uninterrupted view of Gao. She needed a plan to get one of the bells from her sensei, or she was going back to the academy, and she had worked too hard for it all to be in vain. She had been focused on what was in front of her, but had missed Naruto and Ga's clones as they approached from behind her, which startled her and made her squeak. That is, if Naruto's clone hadn't clamped her hand over her mouth. "Do you think you can warn a girl the next time? I almost had a heart attack," Yakumo said, gazing at them as if she were going to commit suicide. Yakumo frowned as Ga's clone said, "Sorry, but this was the easiest way to fill you in on what's up with this test." As if it were so clear, Yakumo asserted, "The test is all about getting the bells." "No, the bells may be part of the test, but they aren't the true goal of the test." Naruto's clone stated, "The true test is about working together as a team to get the bells." But there are only 2 bells, Yakumo replied, so even if we work as a team one of us will be headed back to the academy. That's the point of the test, the bells are to divide us so we focus more about ourselves than our teammates. K. Ga's clone replied. Yakumo blinked at this and felt embarrassed that she had been duped by something so basic, but that was the whole point. The simplest tricks were the most effective. Alright, so what is the strategy? In the hopes that the brothers would have something planned, Yakumo inquired. Yakumo raised an eyebrow in response to Naruto's clone's remark. I think it's time we pull a sneaky fox. K. Ga's clone simply laughed while glancing at the other clone. A cunning fox? Yakumo asked, her thoughts going blank at the word. We haven't pulled one of those in a while, so do you really think it will work? When K. Ga's clone asked, Naruto simply grinned. What is a cunning fox? Yakumo inquired, growing irritated. Still grinning, Naruto's clone remarked, that's why I am sure it will work, after all we never really pulled one on Chan. Alright, so what exactly is a cunning fox? Yakumo hissed, grabbing the attention of both of her teammates. Is the saying, the wolf is in the henhouse, familiar to you? Yakumo was asked by K. Ga's clone. Since this was a well-known saying, Yakumo scowled and said, of course, who hasn't? Well, while the wolf is making a scene out in the henhouse as the farmer runs outside, the fox sneaks in and steals dinner off the table. Naruto's clone answered. Yakumo had to acknowledge that the plan was sound, but would it succeed? After all, their sensei was AJ Nin. Would she be duped by such a straightforward ruse? This test wouldn't have such a high failure rate if it were that easy. However, the team had already passed the test if its purpose was to determine their ability to collaborate. Still uncertain about the outcome of this plan, Yakumo asked, so, who is the fox and who is the wolf? As the 3 of them devised their plan, Naruto's clone remarked, the wolf here is actually 2 wolves and that is just the start. After standing there for 25 minutes, Gao began to suspect that her 3 students were hesitating and unsure whether to approach, but she knew Naruto better than to assume that he would not flee but would instead attempt to find a way to defend himself. But before she could go any farther down that mental rabbit hole, Yakumo emerged from the woods by herself. Naturally, this caused Gao to shake her head, but she stopped when she realized something was amiss. A purple haze poured from her mouth and solidified into a humanoid form as Yakumo staggered forward, holding her head in both hands. According to what she had read, Yakumo harbored an inner force known as the Ito, which was so powerful that the genjutsu it used could actually do harm. Gao was aware that she needed to move quickly to protect her student, but as she attempted to approach, a tree that had grown out of the ground and wrapped its limbs around her restrained her. As she watched her student who was going to be killed, a fact she had read about the Ito in the girl's file suddenly came to her. According to the file, she had absorbed that being so she wouldn't have to worry about it running amok and harming anyone, as it had attempted to do with her parents. Now that she realized what was happening, Gao realized that the genjutsu was a distraction, and she knew how to escape it. However, letting go of the genjutsu brought her back to reality and confronted her with a small group of Naruto clones sprinting directly at her. She was shocked to learn that Naruto and Yakumo had not collaborated. On the contrary, she had assumed that the brothers would have teamed up because they were familiar enough with her fighting style to have a remote chance of defeating her. Since she had last seen Naruto prior to his entry into Training Ground 44, she was even more shocked by how swift and powerful he had become. With their combined attacks, the group of clones was really putting a lot of pressure on her and had even managed to land a few solid blows. When did he get so strong? As Naruto's subsequent blow was deflected, she pondered. As Gao destroyed clone after clone, the real Naruto would pull back and perform a series of hand signals for a jutsu, proving that she was always superior at kenjutsu. When 4 Naruto clones gathered and began hurling shuriken at her, the real Naruto yelled, "Wind-style Gale Palm." A burst of wind erupted from his hands, accelerating the shuriken's trajectory toward its target. Gao would have avoided this attack if it weren't for the shout, "Wind-style Great Breakthrough." A Naruto clone approaching from behind sent a powerful gust of wind at her back, sending her flying directly at the approaching shuriken. When the shuriken struck their target, she disappeared in a cloud of smoke. The clone that had just struck her and sliced him down was beside the real Gao as he rose from the ground. When she heard a twig break behind her, she turned to Naruto and grinned. She dodged Yakumo's blow and used the girl's momentum to grab her arm and throw her at Naruto. With a quick flip, Yakumo aimed her foot at Naruto's palms, using them as a springboard to propel herself back at her sensei, with whom she locked eyes for a brief moment. Why? Gao leaned back, allowing Yakumo to pass her directly, rolling quickly on the landing to burn off the momentum before crouching up and revealing a long sleeve that revealed a wrist mounted Senbon launcher that fired 5 Senbon at Y. Gao. Congratulations to you and Yakumo for coming up with a solid plan, but you're going to have to do better than that. The real Y. Gao stood where the now gone Naruto clone had been, and she smiled as she said. As soon as these words left her mouth, a smoke bomb hit her from behind and caused her to stumble. The Senbon had hit their target as she came up, but it turned out to be a Naruto clone that vanished. After regaining her equilibrium, she felt a pull at the location of the bells. As she bounded out of the smoke cloud, she noticed that both bells were still there, but that Ga was now standing alongside Naruto and Yakumo. The fact that the three had come up with this small plan made Gao smile. Well, I guess that this means that the three of you can work together. That means you? Why? Gao said, shaking her head as she observed the trio. She continued as a small red fox ran up to Ga, scurried up his leg, and ended up sitting on his shoulder with both bells in its mouth. She noticed that both bells were now gone when she looked down. The fox lowered its head and Gao blinked. Ga nodded and reached up to remove the bells from its mouth, but the little fox leapt down from his shoulder and disappeared in a puff of smoke. Well played indeed. So, who are you giving the other bell to? Why? Gao asked, grinning at this. After giving her a quick glance, Ga threw the bells to Naruto and Yakumo, who caught them. He then threw them back to Gao, who smiled at the result. Naruto said, "We did this as a team. If you send one of us back, you send all of us back." Yakumo and Ga moved to stand beside him, indicating that they agreed with his assertion. The three teammates grinned when Gao said, "Very well, you all pass. You three are now officially Team 12. Take the rest of the day off because tomorrow the real training and work starts." To celebrate their newfound unity, the three asked Gao if she would join them for dinner. She replied that she would meet them later for food because she had to report to the Hokage right now, and then left using body flicker. When Gao arrived at the Hokage's office, he was joined by a number of other Nin. The meeting began with each sensei who had been assigned a team reporting on whether or not their team of genin passed the test. As she looked around, she saw that Kakashi was not present. The sensei presented their reports one by one. After roughly half of them had finished, Kakashi arrived and casually said, "Yo," as if he wasn't just arriving 30 minutes late. Everyone, including Minato, turned to face the vault as he continued, "Sorry I'm late, I got lost on the road of life." Asuma stood back up and shook his head, asking, "Really, Kakashi? That excuse is so old nobody is using it anymore. Heck, most people don't even remember that one." With a nervous smile, Kakashi scratched behind his head. As Kakashi presented his report, Minato sighed and asked, "So Kakashi, how did they do?" The masked Nin grinned and said, "They passed. Not that I was expecting any other result. I mean, they're your kids after all." Everyone's eyes were on Gao when she said, "Team 12 also passed Hokage. Sama, they were pretty good for a couple of rookies. Their teamwork was well executed, but the most surprising thing was Naruto." Minato raised an eyebrow at her statement and asked if she could continue, which she did. Gao lifted the sleeves of her shirt to reveal the light-colored bruises that spotted her arm. "I knew he was fast, but since he came back from the Forest of Death, that kid is faster than ever. And I mean fast. I'd estimate that in terms of pure speed, he's at least high. Nin to low. Nin. But that's not all, he hits pretty flippin' hard too. These were from Naruto. I'm not joking when I say he actually pushed me hard. The first move he made was a kick to the head, and I'm sure if I hadn't dodged it, I'd be in the hospital with a concussion right now." The room fell silent as she finished her report. They were shocked and curious about what else he might have been concealing when the Academy's supposedly most ordinary child actually forced the renowned sword mistress of the Leaf to fight him as if she meant to. Minato was aware that he needed to solve that mystery as soon as possible. He didn't think he would make it very far, though, because Naruto still didn't fully trust him, or the majority of the family, for that matter. Thank you everyone. For the genin who didn't pass, please notify them that they will be put on reserve until they are placed on a team. Alright? That's all I have. Thank all of you for your reports and meet me tomorrow for your squad's first mission.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.